The night was alive with whispers, though no wind moved the ancient trees. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the hills, curling over the villages like fingers of some unseen hand. Lanterns flickered in the windows of stone cottages, and torches sputtered along the walls of the castle, sending brief sparks into the thick darkness. Every sound, footsteps on cobblestones, the distant howl of a wolf, the soft clatter of armor, felt magnified, as if the very air carried a warning. In this world of candlelight and steel, a secret moved quietly, invisible yet powerful, a secret that could unravel the lives of kings and commoners alike. It was called the Iron Cross, and even its name struck fear into the hearts of those who had only heard of it in whispers. The kingdom lay draped in fog, a veil thick enough to obscure not just the land but the truth itself. Stories traveled along the roads, carried by merchants and wandering monks, spoken in hurried tones around the hearths of peasants, whispered under the vaulted ceilings of churches. They spoke of a prophecy older than the crown itself, a warning that had been repeated across generations. Some claimed it foretold conquest, others ruin. Some whispered it promised unimaginable power to those daring enough to claim it. And somewhere, beyond the reach of ordinary men, the Iron Cross waited, silent, unyielding, and as enigmatic as the prophecy that defined it. No one knew where the cross had first appeared. Some legends traced it to the frozen forests in the north, where hermits and mystics guarded ancient texts, believing themselves the last line between humankind and chaos. Others claimed it had been forged in a forgotten monastery, deep beneath the stones of the castle, in the flickering shadows of candles that burned with a flame no wind could extinguish. Its material might have been iron, but stories suggested it carried a weight far beyond metal. Those who touched it, or even gazed upon it for too long, found themselves gripped by visions, whispers, and, sometimes, a chilling sense of destiny that felt impossible to resist. Fear of the Iron Cross was not mere superstition. Kings and nobles had acted on these stories, moving armies, issuing secret decrees, and locking away documents that spoke of the prophecy in coded scripts. Councils convened behind closed doors, cloaked in velvet and secrecy, where advisors argued and plotted over parchments illuminated by candlelight. Some rulers dismissed the tales as nonsense, yet still ordered the destruction of manuscripts, as though even doubt was dangerous. Every ruler who encountered hints of the prophecy, or its emblem, felt a chill that could not be ignored. They did not fear the cross itself, at least not in a simple, physical sense. They feared the power it represented, the invisible currents of fate that might sweep away kingdoms with a single, silent stroke. And yet, amid all this fear and secrecy, ordinary people sensed its presence. Children would wake screaming, dreaming of a cross that gleamed red in firelight. Farmers working their fields reported seeing strange glints in the distance, reflections that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Travelers spoke of uncanny guidance on roads that should have been impossible to navigate. It was as if the Iron Cross had a consciousness of its own, moving unseen, weaving through the lives of the living, indifferent to wealth or rank, yet leaving traces that no one could fully ignore. The fog seemed thicker that night, wrapping the kingdom in a suffocating shroud. From the castle walls, the distant countryside looked like a painting smeared in shades of gray and black, yet in the midst of the shadows, the tiniest sparks of movement hinted at life, purpose, and perhaps danger. In those moments, the boundary between reality and legend blurred. Each whisper of wind, each distant shout, each flicker of torchlight might carry a message from the Iron Cross itself, or a warning that history had already begun to write. Some said the prophecy had been whispered by monks long ago, scribbled into the margins of holy texts in ink that turned black over centuries. Others claimed it had been sung in forgotten tongues around altars hidden beneath the stones of abbeys, prayers uttered with both hope and dread. Over time, these fragments of prophecy fused into a single, ominous vision, a world poised on the edge of revelation, a truth too dangerous to reveal, yet too powerful to remain concealed forever. Those who dared to pursue it risked everything: faith, fortune, family, and life itself. It was said that the Iron Cross could not be found through ordinary means. Maps provided no guidance, travelers offered no clues, and even the wisest scholars could only speculate. The cross existed in stories, in symbols, and in the fear it inspired. Yet that fear was as tangible as any sword or siege engine. It rippled through the courts and cloisters, threading through the ambitions of kings, the piety of monks, and the courage or folly of knights. To seek the Iron Cross was to court destiny, and destiny, as all who lived in the kingdom knew, could be both merciless and cruel. And so, the kingdom slumbered uneasily under the weight of its secrets, a land caught between myth and reality, history and legend. Every candle flicker and every whispered rumor hinted at a force beyond comprehension. Somewhere in the darkness, the Iron Cross waited, carrying with it a promise and a threat, a riddle no one could fully solve. The people slept unaware, yet their lives were inextricably bound to this hidden truth, destined to be pulled into a story that had been written long before they were born. The night deepened, the mist thickened, and the shadows stretched further than the eye could see. Somewhere, a monk closed a tattered manuscript with a hand that trembled. Somewhere, a king's hand hovered over a sealed decree, unsure whether the paper before him was salvation or doom. And somewhere, unseen and unyielding, the Iron Cross waited. Its story had begun centuries before, and it would continue long after, a silent witness to humanity's fear, ambition, and unending desire to grasp the unknown. What secret could be so dangerous that the greatest minds of the age trembled at even the suggestion of it? The answer remained hidden, waiting for the brave, or the foolish, to uncover it. And in that silence, in the midst of shadows over the kingdom, the prophecy whispered on. Long before castles rose from stone and armies clashed across the fields of Europe, a prophecy drifted through time like a shadow. It was neither written in grand chronicles nor proclaimed in public squares. Instead, it traveled in whispers, passed from monk to monk, scribe to scribe, noble to noble, hidden in the folds of prayers, tucked into the margins of illuminated manuscripts, and murmured quietly in cloisters where silence was sacred. Those who first heard it could not fully understand it. Yet even in ignorance, its power took hold, wrapping around hearts like a chill they could not shake. The prophecy of the Iron Cross promised upheaval, destiny, and danger. Its meaning remained elusive, yet its presence was undeniable. The earliest known fragments suggested a vision both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Lines written in fading ink spoke of a cross forged from iron, yet touched by forces beyond human comprehension. It would appear in times of turmoil, a symbol of both salvation and ruin. Some monks believed it was a test of faith. Others feared it was a warning of calamity. Across generations, the prophecy's words were altered, misinterpreted, and secreted away, leaving only shadows of the original message. Each retelling deepened the mystery, layering meaning upon meaning, until the truth became almost impossible to distinguish from legend. What made the prophecy particularly dangerous was its precision and ambiguity. It spoke not of ordinary events, but of the rise and fall of kings, of armies defeated without warning, of ordinary men caught in the currents of fate they could neither predict nor control. It hinted at wealth, conquest, and disaster, yet refused to reveal the circumstances in which these would unfold. Scholars who dared to analyze it were struck by contradictions. A promise of power immediately followed by a curse, a blessing entwined with ruin. It was a text designed to haunt, to shape human behavior by fear, hope, and the unknown. The prophecy traveled through Europe on the lips of those sworn to secrecy. In monasteries, monks debated its meaning under candlelight, their eyes reflecting both awe and terror. Many considered it divine, a message from forces beyond understanding, yet even the holiest feared its implications. The prophecy was said to favor neither church nor crown, yet it affected both, twisting ambitions, inspiring loyalty, and breeding betrayal. A king who learned of it might hesitate to attack a rival, fearing unseen consequences. A general might alter battle plans simply because the words had whispered into his mind, "The cross will rise where shadows gather, and those who see it shall tremble." The reach of the prophecy was subtle yet profound. It was never proclaimed in public for fear of inciting chaos, yet it shaped events quietly, invisibly. Nobles obsessed over cryptic hints in letters, over symbols in cathedral carvings, over coded marginalia in sacred texts. They sought patterns where none might exist, yet often found them. Entire campaigns and alliances were said to have been influenced by a single line, misread or half-remembered, yet powerful enough to redirect history. Even the bravest knights whispered its words in sleepless nights, wondering if destiny itself had chosen to weave them into a story they could never escape. Some historians later suggested that the prophecy was born out of fear itself. In an era of famine, disease, and war, the unknown carried immense weight. People longed for explanation, for signs, for warnings. The Iron Cross became a vessel for these fears, a symbol of forces beyond control. Yet there was something more. Those who studied it closely began to suspect a pattern in its appearances, a design beyond mere superstition. Could a single object, a cross of iron, truly carry the weight of history? And if so, who or what determined its path? These questions, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable, made the prophecy irresistible and terrifying. Despite its danger, the prophecy had a magnetic pull. Some monks, scholars, and nobles were drawn to it as moths to flame, compelled to decipher its meaning, to possess knowledge no one else could hold. Their obsession often bordered on madness. Diaries and letters recount stories of sleepless nights, of trembling hands hovering over texts that seemed to pulse with unseen life, of whispers in empty corridors. There were tales of men who vanished after glimpsing too much, of visions so vivid they could not be distinguished from waking life. The prophecy demanded attention, and those who ignored it did so at their own peril. Interestingly, the prophecy was rarely consistent in its telling. Some versions describe the cross as a source of divine power, capable of shaping destiny for the worthy. Others warned of death and chaos, describing the cross as a weapon of unimaginable ruin. Its duality only increased the allure, feeding both hope and fear. People became divided. Some saw it as a guide, a tool to achieve greatness. Others saw it as a curse to be avoided at all costs. This tension, this fragile balance between faith and fear, became a defining element of the prophecy's influence. Every whispered retelling carried weight, and every interpretation had consequences. The Iron Cross itself was often described in cryptic detail, never fully understood. Some accounts suggested it gleamed with an unnatural light in the moon. Others spoke of a heaviness that pressed upon the soul. It was said to leave a mark on those who encountered it. Not a physical wound, but a psychic imprint that lingered, a sensation that destiny had reached into their very being. Knights and kings alike reported dreams filled with visions of the cross, armies arrayed in shadow, and futures that twisted in impossible directions. It was not merely a symbol, but an experience, a force that challenged comprehension and demanded reverence. Even as the prophecy spread, its true origin remained hidden. Some claimed it had been given by angels to a single monk who inscribed it in secret, believing mankind could not yet bear the knowledge. Others whispered it had been discovered in the ruins of a far-off civilization, older than the kingdoms of Europe, and carried by wandering scholars who did not understand its full meaning. Its journey was as mysterious as its content, traveling from cloister to castle, from north to south, leaving only fragments of certainty amid a vast sea of questions. The effect of the prophecy on the kingdom was tangible. Political alliances shifted subtly as leaders considered its implications. Soldiers marched into battles with unease, unsure whether their actions were guided by strategy or by some invisible hand. Couriers carried messages that were altered or hidden to avoid accidentally fulfilling or averting the prophecy. Even the common people, though unaware of the specifics, felt an underlying tension in the air, a sense that history itself was bending toward a hidden shape, guided by a force they could neither name nor resist. Ultimately, the whispered prophecy of the Iron Cross was more than words. It was a presence, a current that flowed through the lives of everyone it touched. It promised power and warned of ruin. It drew the ambitious, terrified the faithful, and haunted the humble. Its influence was quiet yet pervasive, shaping decisions, lives, and destinies without ever revealing itself fully. Those who first heard it, or thought they understood it, were left with a lingering question that never faded. What truth lies behind the Iron Cross, and what price must be paid to know it? By the time the first light of dawn crept over the kingdom, the whispers had already begun anew. The prophecy traveled on, carried in the silent steps of a monk, the careful hand of a scribe, and the restless heart of a king. No one could stop it, and few could fully comprehend it. The Iron Cross waited patiently, and those who listened too closely would find themselves caught in a web of fate, secrecy, and power, with consequences that stretched far beyond the reach of mortal understanding. The origin of the Iron Cross was shrouded in as much mystery as the prophecy it represented. Some legends claimed it was forged in a single night, deep within the bowels of a hidden monastery, where the walls themselves seemed to hum with an unearthly energy. Others whispered it had been created by a wandering craftsman, a man whose hands were guided not by skill alone, but by visions of the future. No one knew his name. Some even suggested he was not entirely human, that the cross had been shaped by a being straddling the line between this world and the next. What is certain is that the cross became more than metal. It became a symbol, a force that carried meaning far beyond its iron frame. It was said to hold the weight of destiny itself. When first lifted by a mortal hand, it allegedly resonated with a low hum, a vibration that could be felt in the bones. Witnesses claimed a sudden awareness would descend, a knowing that left them both awed and terrified. Was it divine blessing or ancient magic? No historian could say for certain, though every account suggested that this small, unassuming object held power that could not be ignored. The earliest records are fragmentary and contradictory. Some chroniclers described a simple cross, blackened by fire, its surface etched with symbols that no living scholar could decipher. Others spoke of a cross with edges so sharp they could cut steel, yet somehow harmless in the hands of the worthy. It is possible that both accounts were true, interpreted differently by those whose perception of reality was already shaped by fear and faith. The truth of the Iron Cross was hidden not in the material, but in the reaction it inspired: awe, devotion, obsession, and terror in equal measure. Those who first encountered it were often unprepared for its impact. A monk, devoted to prayer and study, might lift it only to feel visions of distant lands, armies in motion, and the fate of kingdoms flash before his eyes. A knight might see a battlefield strewn with corpses, yet understand that his own actions could alter its course. Even the lowliest peasant who glimpsed it reportedly shivered, sensing a weight far beyond comprehension pressing upon the soul. The cross, in its essence, seemed to judge the intent and ambition of those who dared approach it, granting clarity to some while punishing arrogance in others. It is said that the first true owner of the Iron Cross disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Some accounts suggest he was drawn into a vision so vivid that it became indistinguishable from reality. Others claim he was taken by forces that no mortal could resist, leaving behind only a faint echo of his presence and the cross itself. This pattern would repeat throughout history. Those who sought it either vanished, were consumed by obsession, or emerged transformed, bearing knowledge and burdens that could not be shared without risk. The Iron Cross demanded payment, though it rarely revealed the cost until it had been exacted. The forging of the cross was as enigmatic as its powers. Some legends spoke of metals collected from the farthest reaches of the known world, iron from the mines of the north, minerals from hidden valleys, and even fragments of meteorites fallen from the sky. It was said that only by combining these elements under the guidance of an unknown hand could the cross take on its unique resonance. Fire, water, and ritual were all said to play a role, and those present during its creation reportedly heard whispers in languages that had long been lost to humankind. Whatever the truth, the result was a cross unlike any other, a relic both physical and spiritual, capable of shaping the lives of those who came near it. Yet the power of the Iron Cross was subtle. It did not strike fear by its presence alone, nor did it grant instant triumph to those who held it. Instead, it worked quietly, nudging events, influencing decisions, and revealing glimpses of destiny to those prepared to receive them. Some saw it as a guide, others as a test. The nobility who coveted it hoped it would grant victory. The monks who guarded it feared the knowledge it imparted, and the warriors who stumbled upon it often found themselves changed irrevocably. The cross was a mirror, reflecting ambition, faith, and human frailty back at those who sought it. Stories of the cross's early influence are fragmented, yet suggest a trajectory both remarkable and terrifying. In one account, a small duchy narrowly avoided war because a ruler claimed a vision from the cross, prompting him to retreat from battle at the last moment. In another, a commander seized it in the heat of conquest, only to find his army struck by disease and misfortune, leaving him questioning whether the cross had cursed him. The lessons were inconsistent, almost cruelly so, as though the object itself sought to test the resolve, morality, and courage of each hand that grasped it. Over time, the cross became more than an object. It became a symbol of hidden knowledge. Monks, scholars, and rulers alike sought to understand its secrets, recording sightings, visions, and interpretations in books that were often hidden in vaults or destroyed when curiosity proved dangerous. Its legend grew, layer upon layer, as each generation added fragments of understanding or misunderstanding to the story. The Iron Cross became both a historical artifact and a living enigma, a puzzle that could not be solved, yet demanded attention from those who dared approach it. Even in its earliest days, the cross carried the duality that would define its legend: salvation and destruction, knowledge and curse, hope and despair. To touch, it was to confront both the brilliance and darkness within oneself. To study, it was to risk obsession and madness. And to ignore, it was impossible, for its influence seeped into the very fabric of the kingdoms it passed through, shaping events invisibly, like the shadow of a mountain stretching over a valley at dusk. The Iron Cross, though small in size, commanded reverence beyond its measure. Its birth marked not merely the creation of an object, but the beginning of a force that would haunt centuries, guide wars, inspire legends, and terrify the hearts of those who dared to glimpse its power. From that moment, the prophecy and the cross were inseparable. One could not exist without the other, and the fate of countless lives would be bound to the mysterious energy contained within a simple frame of iron. Its story had begun in silence, but its echo would resonate through history, shaping empires, stirring devotion, and sparking fear. And though few could claim to understand it, all who encountered the Iron Cross felt its pull, a quiet but undeniable tug toward destiny. It was a beginning, but also a warning. Power, knowledge, and fate were intertwined, and none could claim them without consequence. In the grand halls of medieval kingdoms, where banners hung heavy with the weight of lineage and conquest, the Iron Cross was more than a legend. It was a source of dread. Kings, though clothed in velvet and crowned with gold, felt the chill of something invisible when the prophecy was mentioned. Their advisors whispered it in the dark corners of council chambers, careful to speak only when their monarch's attention wavered, knowing that even the faintest hint of its power could ignite paranoia. The cross, so small and unassuming in physical form, carried a weight far greater than any throne, a weight that pressed upon rulers' hearts with a subtle but undeniable pressure. Some sovereigns attempted to dismiss it as superstition, a story spun by monks and wandering bards to entertain or manipulate. Yet fear does not vanish by skepticism alone. Even the most hardened king, versed in strategy and warfare, could not ignore the tales of armies falling apart after glimpsing it, of courtiers driven to madness, of advisors vanishing without explanation. Each story, passed along by trembling lips, strengthened the legend and deepened the unease. What was at first a whisper became a shadow, looming over every decision, influencing kings in ways that few would admit, even to themselves. The Iron Cross had the uncanny ability to expose weakness. A ruler who sought to consolidate power might find himself plagued by indecision, visions of defeat, or the inexplicable failure of loyal troops. Some kings reported dreams in which the cross hovered over their kingdoms, casting a light that revealed both hidden enemies and hidden truths, and yet offered no guidance on how to act. The object, though unseen, became a silent judge of ambition, revealing the consequences of pride, greed, or arrogance before they could manifest. Even the most confident monarchs learned that power alone could not shield them from forces they could not comprehend. Courts became arenas of suspicion, where advisors vied for influence while fearful of inadvertently fulfilling or preventing the prophecy. Secret meetings were convened, sealed with oaths of silence. Spies were dispatched not to gather intelligence about enemies, but to track the rumors of the cross's presence. Documents were hidden in vaults, manuscripts burned in hidden chambers, and sacred texts encoded with warnings meant to be understood only by the most trusted eyes. Each action taken in the shadow of the prophecy carried weight, for kings began to realize that their decisions, no matter how calculated, might be observed by a force beyond their control. Paranoia spread like wildfire. Some rulers turned against their closest allies, convinced that a leak of information about the cross could invite disaster. Brothers plotted against brothers, knights betrayed their lords, and trusted advisors disappeared under circumstances too strange to explain. The Iron Cross became a specter haunting every corner of the kingdom, a force that shaped the political landscape as much as armies or gold. Even those who had never seen it feared its influence, because stories of its effects traveled faster than any messenger. A whisper could alter a treaty, a rumor could redirect an army, and a single vision could rewrite history. In some regions, kings sought to possess the cross, believing that if they could hold it, they could control the forces it represented. Yet every attempt ended in calamity. The cross would vanish from their grasp, leaving only confusion and destruction behind. In one account, a ruler claimed to have glimpsed it resting on an altar in a remote monastery. He sent a retinue of soldiers to retrieve it, only for the men to return broken, lost, or dead, and the cross itself nowhere to be found. The legend grew, reinforcing the belief that it was not an object to be owned, but a force to be respected or feared. Some historians argue that the cross's influence extended beyond superstition into strategic advantage. A ruler aware of the prophecy might hesitate at crucial moments, sparing an enemy out of fear that overreach would invite disaster. Another might abandon a siege because visions suggested the outcome would be ruinous. This unseen hand of destiny, whether real or imagined, shaped the course of battles, diplomacy, and governance. The Iron Cross did not wield armies, yet it shaped the decisions that determined the fates of thousands, leaving historians to ponder how much of history was written by human hands and how much by unseen forces. The psychological effect was profound. Kings could not discuss the prophecy openly, for fear of being labeled superstitious or weak. Yet suppression only increased its grip. Advisors who feared their ruler's reaction passed the story quietly to those they trusted, and soon it traveled through the corridors of power like a ghost. Every whisper, every rumor carried weight. Monarchs who attempted to ignore it found their sleep haunted by visions of cross-shaped shadows hovering over battlefields, over towns, over their very lives. The cross, it seemed, was omnipresent in its absence, shaping both thought and action. Fear was not uniform. It manifested differently across kingdoms. Some rulers became obsessed, studying manuscripts, and searching for signs that might indicate the cross's location or meaning. Others grew cautious, retreating from conflict, fortifying castles, and surrounding themselves with loyal advisors. Some sought to destroy the legend entirely, burning texts and exiling monks, only to find that erasure was impossible. The cross's story persisted, immune to suppression, growing more potent with each retelling. In this way, it became both a weapon and a shield, a force that could shape ambition and check overreach, as if destiny itself had chosen a tangible vessel to enforce its will. Interestingly, the fear of the Iron Cross often extended beyond personal safety to the realm of morality and conscience. A king contemplating cruelty or betrayal might pause, haunted by visions of the cross, wondering if his actions would invoke disaster. In this way, the prophecy exerted not only political influence, but ethical influence, shaping the behavior of rulers in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. It demanded respect, humility, and caution, teaching the powerful that even authority has limits when confronted with forces beyond comprehension. The Iron Cross also became a measure of legacy. Kings reflected not only on what they conquered or lost, but on how their decisions aligned with the invisible pattern suggested by the prophecy. Did their reign honor the balance of destiny? Did it invite ruin through arrogance or greed? Such reflections, whether conscious or subconscious, ensure that the legend influenced not only immediate events, but the arc of history itself. Each ruler's fear, caution, or ambition left imprints on the kingdom, traces of a subtle but pervasive force that shaped outcomes long after the cross itself had vanished from sight. Ultimately, the Iron Cross became an omnipresent shadow in medieval politics, a force that transcended the material world. It was not just a relic, nor merely a prophecy, but a living presence that interacted with human ambition, fear, and desire. Its influence was quiet, invisible, yet undeniable. Every kingdom, every court, every ruler who encountered even a fragment of its story felt the weight of something greater than themselves. And as long as the cross existed, so too did the tension between mortal ambition and the inexorable currents of destiny. Kings feared it not because they lacked power, but because it held a mirror to the limits of their understanding. It was a reminder that some forces cannot be conquered, only respected. And in this fear, the Iron Cross ensured its presence in history, shaping minds and hearts in ways that mere swords and armies could never achieve. Those who thought they controlled the kingdom discovered, time and again, that control was an illusion when destiny chose to intervene. Amid the stone walls of monasteries, far from the glittering crowns and battles of kings, another form of power quietly thrived. The monks, devoted to prayer, study, and the preservation of knowledge, held secrets that could shape empires and haunt the living. Among these secrets was the prophecy of the Iron Cross. To the world, monks appeared peaceful, serene, and removed from worldly ambition. Yet behind the cloistered doors, they wrestled with fear and responsibility. They were the keepers of a force so potent that it demanded vigilance, wisdom, and secrecy beyond mortal measure. The Iron Cross arrived in their hands not as an object of curiosity, but as a weight of duty. Manuscripts, fragile and ancient, were entrusted to the care of those who understood their danger. Marginalia in Latin and symbols that defied translation recorded visions, warnings, and fragmented instructions. Some monks claimed to hear whispers in empty corridors, soft and urgent, guiding their hands as they copied or concealed passages. Others reported visions in the stillness of the night, flickering crosses, armies in motion, and distant lands entwined with destinies unknown. The monastery became both sanctuary and prison, for those who bore the secret could never speak of it, yet could never ignore it. Obsession took root in subtle ways. A monk might find himself lingering over a single page, tracing the patterns of symbols with trembling fingers, heart racing with a mixture of fear and awe. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams in which the cross appeared, suspended in light, demanding understanding that seemed forever beyond reach. Some who attempted to interpret the texts fell into despair, unable to reconcile the duality of the prophecy, the promise of guidance, the threat of ruin. And yet, the very difficulty of comprehension strengthened its power. The unknown, after all, carries a weight that understanding alone cannot rival. Not all monks agreed on the meaning or purpose of the cross. Some viewed it as divine, a tool for guiding the faithful through the turbulence of the world. They approached it with reverence, studying its symbols as one would study Scripture, seeking lessons applicable to the souls of men. Others feared it as a force of darkness, a corrupting influence that tempted pride and ambition. Secret debates unfolded in shadowed cells, where the echo of whispered arguments mingled with the cold breath of the stone walls. And in these debates, the tension of human nature, faith, fear, curiosity, played out in its most concentrated form. The cross demanded more than study. It demanded obedience. Some monks reported that when a particular passage was misread or mishandled, misfortune would follow, subtle yet unmistakable. A scriptorium might catch fire, a manuscript might vanish, or a visiting noble might die suddenly. Whether coincidence or supernatural justice, the result was always the same: a heightened sense of vigilance, a tacit acknowledgement that the cross was alive in its influence, invisible yet omnipresent. Monks became both guardians and prisoners of their own devotion, aware that every action carried consequences beyond comprehension. Fear among the monks was compounded by the knowledge that the prophecies' influence extended far beyond the monastery walls. Kings, knights, and nobles all sought the cross, unaware of the warnings etched in ink and whispered in prayer. The monks realized that possession of the prophecies' knowledge placed them at the center of a delicate, dangerous web. One misstep, a letter intercepted, a misinterpreted passage, a lapse in discretion, could draw the attention of the powerful, exposing both the secret and the keepers to peril. Some monks withdrew further into isolation, dedicating themselves entirely to study and concealment, while others grappled with the temptation to use the cross's power to influence events. This tension between duty and temptation created a profound moral struggle. Monks were human, susceptible to ambition, curiosity, and fear, yet they carried the weight of a secret that could destroy kingdoms. In some accounts, they altered manuscripts deliberately, encoding false interpretations to mislead those unworthy of the truth. In others, they fled in terror, abandoning their posts when visions or whispers became too overwhelming. The monastery, meant to be a place of sanctuary, became a theater of human conflict played out in whispers and shadow, a silent stage where the power of the Iron Cross was both revered and feared. Stories of early keepers illustrate the stakes. A monk named Benedict, or perhaps another, for names were often concealed, was said to have spent months alone in a crypt beneath the monastery, attempting to decipher a fragment of prophecy. By the end, he emerged visibly aged, his eyes hollow, muttering in an unknown tongue, and clutching a manuscript that would later vanish without trace. Another account speaks of a pair of monks who argued over the meaning of the cross, ultimately leading to one disappearing under mysterious circumstances, leaving the other to bear both guilt and knowledge. These narratives, fragmentary and inconsistent, reveal a singular truth. The prophecy's power was real enough to shape human lives, beliefs, and destinies. Yet the Iron Cross was not merely a source of fear. It was also a source of awe. Monks who glimpsed its symbols spoke of illumination, moments of understanding that felt like divine insight. Patterns in nature, in scripture, even in mundane events, suddenly revealed themselves as interconnected, as if the cross held the threads of the world in its invisible grasp. But such insight came at a cost. Those who saw too much often lost the ability to relate to ordinary life. They were haunted, consumed, and forever changed, living in the tension between knowledge and the mortal limitations of understanding. Ultimately, the monk's role was a delicate balance of secrecy, interpretation, and moral vigilance. They were neither rulers nor warriors, yet they held a power that could influence kings and armies alike. Their lives were quiet, yet fraught with tension. Their devotion was deep, yet shadowed by the possibility of corruption. The monastery became a liminal space where the earthly and the mystical converged, and the line between protector and pawn blurred. To serve the prophecy was to live in constant awareness of forces unseen, a life defined by vigilance, humility, and fear. Through centuries, these monastic shadows ensured that the Iron Cross remained hidden, its story preserved yet obscured. They maintained a fragile equilibrium between revelation and concealment, between power and peril. And though their names were often forgotten, their labor shaped the course of history, quietly steering events from behind stone walls and candlelight. They were the silent custodians of destiny, and in their hands, the prophecy of the Iron Cross continued to move through the centuries, invisible yet profoundly present. Deep within the decaying halls of an abandoned abbey, hidden beneath layers of dust and shadow, lay manuscripts that had not seen light for centuries. Their pages were blackened by age, some edges singed as if kissed by fire, others damp and curling with the slow creep of time. Scholars and monks alike whispered of these documents in reverent tones, for they were believed to contain fragments of the prophecy of the Iron Cross. Not merely words, these texts carried symbols, coded language, and warnings that few could decipher and fewer dared to study. The manuscripts were alive with menace and meaning, a bridge between human curiosity and forces unseen. The origin of these manuscripts was as enigmatic as the prophecy itself. Some claimed they were written by the very monk who first encountered the Iron Cross, copying visions that had haunted him in sleepless nights. Others believed they had been composed collectively over generations, each hand adding cryptic notes, drawings, and symbols and margins that only heightened the mystery. The ink, faded and brittle, held the weight of centuries, yet its influence endured, whispering through time. Those who attempted to read it often described a sensation of being observed, as if the text itself could sense intent and respond accordingly. One manuscript, known among scholars as the Codex Obscura, was particularly feared. Its pages were filled with diagrams that suggested movement, balance, and power, yet resisted literal interpretation. Knights and nobles who glimpsed it reported feeling a strange pull, a compulsion to understand what their minds could not fully grasp. Some monks claimed that when the codex was handled incorrectly, it produced subtle misfortunes. A candle might topple and start a fire. A lock would jam at a crucial moment, or a messenger would fail to deliver critical information. It was as though the manuscript itself guarded the secrets of the Iron Cross, demanding respect and exactitude. What made these manuscripts truly terrifying was not the threat of physical harm, but the psychological weight they carried. Those who studied them often experienced a profound disorientation. Letters and symbols seemed to shift under the eye, forming patterns and connections that vanished when one tried to write them down. Images of the Iron Cross appeared in visions, sometimes glowing with light, sometimes dark and menacing, as if the object could project itself into the mind. Dreams became vivid landscapes where the cross appeared in forests, castles, and battlefields, guiding, warning, and testing the observer. Accounts of early discoveries suggest that even reading a single page could alter the course of an individual's life. A scribe might devote years to interpretation, only to vanish mysteriously, leaving behind notes so cryptic that future generations could not make sense of them. Some scholars were driven to obsession, pacing hallways of monasteries, muttering fragments of Latin and coded phrases, their eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Others refused to touch the pages entirely, sensing that mere curiosity could invite danger. The manuscripts were not inert. They interacted with the minds of those who approached them, revealing knowledge while exacting a subtle toll. The manuscripts were not confined to one location. Accounts suggest that copies, fragments, and interpretations traveled across Europe, concealed in chests, hidden in castles, and smuggled between monasteries. Each copy varied slightly, some containing additions, others deliberate omissions meant to mislead. This proliferation of texts created a network of knowledge and misinformation that confounded historians for centuries. Even those who sought to compile them faced an overwhelming challenge to discern truth from fabrication, guidance from deception, and prophecy from superstition. Among the most curious features of these manuscripts were the illustrations. Strange crosses, geometric patterns, and scenes of armies and kings intertwined with symbols that appeared neither wholly human nor entirely abstract. Some scholars speculated that the images encoded movements of fate, warning of events yet to unfold. Others believed they represented the spiritual resonance of the Iron Cross, a language beyond words, comprehensible only to those attuned to the unseen forces it embodied. Regardless of interpretation, the effect was unmistakable. The viewer felt the cross's presence, a weight pressing into consciousness with an intensity that could not be ignored. The manuscripts also recorded the consequences of disobedience, mistakes, or misinterpretation. Stories of monks, knights, and nobles who had failed to respect the warnings were interwoven with accounts of triumph, survival, and revelation. These narratives served as both instruction and cautionary tale, a subtle psychological mechanism reinforcing the power of the prophecy. Every page was a lesson in humility, fear, and the fine line between knowledge and obsession. To hold such a manuscript was to acknowledge the delicate balance between human agency and the inexorable influence of destiny. In one particularly chilling tale, a monk discovered a page detailing a vision of an approaching army, the Iron Cross suspended in the sky above the battlefield. The monk attempted to warn the king, interpreting the symbols as guidance. The king, skeptical yet uneasy, altered his strategy slightly. The result was catastrophic: miscommunication, chaos, and the deaths of thousands. Scholars debated for years whether the prophecy had been fulfilled or whether human error had magnified its influence. The lesson, however, was clear. The manuscripts carried power, but it was neither absolute nor fully comprehensible. The very act of translation was fraught with peril. Languages of ink, cipher, and symbol required interpretation that could easily mislead. One word misread, one mark misunderstood, and the intended message could transform into a curse, an omen, or a false promise. Those who attempted to decode these texts often found themselves in isolation, consumed by visions, or haunted by voices that seemed to echo the cross's presence. Each manuscript, each fragment, each diagram carried a subtle yet insistent reminder. Knowledge came at a price, and understanding could be both gift and burden. Ultimately, the blackened manuscripts represented the intersection of human curiosity and divine, or perhaps supernatural, mystery. They were not merely records, but instruments of influence, shaping thoughts, decisions, and destinies across centuries. Hidden from ordinary eyes, yet capable of shaping kings, warriors, and monks alike, the texts embodied the enigmatic essence of the Iron Cross. Those who encountered them were never the same, marked by the weight of knowledge, the lure of secrets, and the haunting possibility that the prophecy was not simply a story, but a living force moving quietly through the corridors of time. Even centuries later, the manuscript's influence persisted. Scholars and adventurers would continue to seek them, driven by ambition, curiosity, or devotion. The Iron Cross remained at the center of this web, an object both present and absent, its power mediated by the blackened pages that carried its secrets. And as long as the manuscripts existed, so too did the tension between discovery and danger, knowledge and obsession, curiosity and fear. The cross was never fully revealed, yet never truly hidden. Its story, encoded in the shadows of ink and parchment, continued to shape the world quietly, invisibly, inexorably. Far from the eyes of kings and commoners, a select group of individuals emerged as guardians of the Iron Cross and its prophecy. They were not warriors nor scholars in the conventional sense, but something in between. Keepers of knowledge, bound by oath and secrecy, entrusted with a force capable of shaping the fates of nations. These secret keepers operated in the shadows, navigating a delicate balance between safeguarding the prophecy and understanding it. To them, the cross was not a relic. It was a living presence, a challenge to be respected, feared, and studied without yielding to temptation. Their ranks were small, intentionally so. Too many hands, they reasoned, would weaken the control necessary to protect the prophecy. The keepers were drawn from monks, scholars, and occasionally nobles whose loyalty could be tested through rigorous trials. Each member underwent a process that was part initiation, part warning. They were shown fragments of manuscripts, cryptic visions, and shadows of the cross itself. Some emerged enlightened, others broken. Few understood that this first encounter was a test of character, a measure of whether human will could resist corruption, ambition, and fear. The keeper's existence was deliberately erased from records. Histories of kingdoms and monasteries often make no mention of them, but fragments of their presence survive in marginal notes, coded letters, and accounts so cryptic that modern scholars struggle to identify their meaning. They were both invisible and indispensable, operating behind walls, under cloaks, and through intermediaries. Their influence extended into courts, battlefields, and monasteries alike, subtly shaping events without ever being acknowledged. Even kings who feared the cross rarely suspected the human custodians who guided, manipulated, or restrained its effect. The secret keepers employed methods that were as subtle as they were rigorous. They tracked the movement of manuscripts, verified the authenticity of texts, and monitored the spread of the prophecy. They interpreted visions, debated symbolic meanings, and occasionally intervened to prevent disaster, though always cautiously, for direct interference could have unintended consequences. The cross itself seemed to test their judgment, revealing glimpses of truth while withholding critical understanding. Success required patience, discipline, and an unshakable awareness that a single misstep could unravel everything. Some keepers became obsessed with understanding the prophecy, often at the expense of everything else. Letters and journals reveal stories of sleepless nights, solitary vigils, and relentless attempts to decode the blackened manuscripts. Yet obsession was dangerous. Many fell victim to visions that blurred reality, whispering voices that manipulated thought, and hallucinations that made the cross seem present even when absent. Those who succumbed to such influence were quietly removed, disappearing into the shadows, leaving their work unfinished and the mystery intact. This cycle reinforced the cross's power. Knowledge, it seemed, could only be approached with humility and restraint. Their influence sometimes extended into the realm of politics and warfare, though discreetly. A general might receive a subtle warning that altered a battlefield maneuver. A king might be advised to delay a treaty based on an obscure interpretation of a manuscript. The keeper's actions were always indirect, a careful dance of guidance without domination. They understood that the prophecy's power could not be wielded directly without consequence. It had to be managed, interpreted, and respected. This delicate stewardship was their defining duty, and their success was measured not by public recognition, but by the unseen balance they maintained. The cross's duality, its promise of revelation and threat of destruction, was the constant challenge for the secret keepers. They bore witness to visions of triumph and ruin, sometimes simultaneously, and had to interpret which path to encourage, which to restrain. Some visions were subtle, glimpses of distant lands, faint symbols in the margins of texts, or flickering shadows at twilight. Others were vivid and terrifying, projecting armies, flames, and death into their consciousness. The cross demanded discernment, and the keeper's greatest test was to resist acting impulsively while remaining attentive to its messages. Loyalty among the keepers was paramount. Any breach of secrecy could lead to catastrophic consequences. Thus, they communicated in riddles, symbols, and coded letters, ensuring that even if intercepted, the meaning remained obscure. Meetings were held in hidden chambers, often beneath monasteries or in secluded forests, where torchlight danced on stone walls as discussion unfolded in hushed tones. Rituals and oaths were common, binding members to secrecy and service. Betrayal was not merely disobedience. It was a risk to the balance of history itself, a force that could invite calamity or misfortune upon kingdoms and individuals alike. Despite their vigilance, keepers were not infallible. Human error, ambition, and fear occasionally led to fractures within the order. Some were tempted to use knowledge for personal gain. Others succumbed to despair under the weight of visions. In rare cases, members vanished mysteriously, their fates unknown. These events were recorded in subtle notes, warnings to successors, and cryptic annotations in manuscripts. The cross's influence remained constant, yet the human custodians who sought to manage it faced unending trials, proving that mastery of the prophecy required not only intellect, but humility and courage. The keeper's stories also reveal the paradox of invisibility. They were unseen by the public and often by the monarchy, yet their decisions shaped lives, battles, and politics. An advisor's subtle guidance could change the course of a war. A monk's interpretation could prevent disaster or inadvertently invite it. The Iron Cross, though the central object of their vigilance, acted as a mirror, revealing ambition, fear, and devotion within those who came near. The keepers understood that their role was not to wield power, but to manage its consequences and exercise in discretion, foresight, and moral judgment. Interestingly, the keepers occasionally acted as intermediaries between different realms of knowledge. Monks in one region might send coded manuscripts to scholars in another, or nobles might receive veiled instructions to prevent interference with the prophecy. In this way, the secret network spanned kingdoms, languages, and centuries, creating an invisible web that connected human ambition with forces beyond comprehension. The keepers were the nodes in this web, maintaining its integrity and ensuring that the Iron Cross remained a force of mystery, influence, and caution rather than chaos. Ultimately, the secret keepers were the silent arbiters of destiny. Their lives were defined not by conquest, wealth, or recognition, but by vigilance, sacrifice, and moral clarity. They existed in the margins of history, shaping events without ever stepping into the light. Their story reminds us that some of the most profound influences in history are unseen, subtle, and carefully guarded. The Iron Cross, through them, became more than a relic. It became a force that intertwined human will with the currents of fate, guided by those brave enough to carry its burden in silence. Even today, Echoes of the secret keepers persist in legends, manuscripts, and obscure records. They were not immortal, but their influence endured, leaving traces in the decisions of rulers, the course of battles, and the shaping of kingdoms. The Iron Cross remained hidden, yet its power radiated through the lives they touched. It was a reminder that true guardianship is not in glory, but in quiet, patient stewardship, and that some mysteries are too potent to be fully revealed. Even as the secret keepers worked in shadow, the legend of the Iron Cross began to ripple outward, carried by whispers, rumors, and fear. In the bustling courts of medieval Europe, where diplomacy and intrigue intertwined with swords and gold, tales of the cross reached ears eager for both wonder and advantage. Merchants, monks, and wandering storytellers spread stories of an object that could reveal destiny, curse kingdoms, or guide rulers with visions beyond mortal comprehension. Whether grounded in fact or superstition, these whispers began to shape perception, altering decisions long before the cross itself appeared. The effect of rumor was subtle but powerful. Kings and nobles, hearing of the cross's presence, began to question the intentions of advisors, the loyalty of generals, and even the faith of allies. A messenger might be delayed, a letter intercepted, or a courtier's counsel disregarded, all because of fear that the prophecy was unfolding invisibly around them. The Iron Cross, though distant and unseen, exercised influence through perception alone. Belief and apprehension became instruments of power, demonstrating that human psychology could serve as both medium and amplifier for forces no one fully understood. Whispers often traveled through unexpected channels. A peasant returning from pilgrimage might recount a vision seen in a monastery. A monk passing through a market could speak in riddles to conceal meaning yet still spread anxiety. A noble returning from a foreign campaign might carry tales that ignited intrigue across multiple courts. Each story was slightly altered by the teller, a mix of truth, interpretation, and embellishment, creating a lattice of rumors that both concealed and revealed the cross's influence. The line between fact and fiction blurred, yet the consequences were very real. Decisions were made, battles diverted, and alliances shifted based on fragments of knowledge and fear alone. The Iron Cross thus became a silent architect of history. In some kingdoms, it inspired caution that prevented unnecessary wars. In others, it provoked paranoia that led to treachery, betrayal, and bloodshed. Nobles who sought to possess or exploit the legend found themselves ensnared in invisible forces that dictated action and consequence. The cross, though absent physically, manipulated human ambition with precision, leveraging belief, rumor, and expectation to shape outcomes. It became clear that its power was not in mere presence, but in the interplay of secrecy, interpretation, and human perception. These whispers also served as warning signals to the keepers, alerting them when the cross's influence approached dangerous visibility. A rumor reaching the wrong ears could provoke war, exile, or the unmasking of a hidden network. Secret letters, coded annotations, and clandestine meetings became essential tools to counteract the unpredictability of human curiosity. The keepers' vigilance was not limited to direct observation. They had to anticipate the consequences of perception itself. Each whisper was a ripple in a delicate system, capable of magnifying effects in unpredictable ways. Some whispers carried mystical overtones. Travelers reported glimpses of glowing crosses in the night sky, shadows that moved independently, or strange apparitions in the corridors of abandoned castles. Stories described individuals suddenly perceiving events before they happened, messages arriving, armies retreating, or conspiracies exposed. Skeptics dismissed these accounts as coincidence or imagination, but the keepers knew better. The Iron Cross operated through subtle means, shaping perception and influencing thought, even when it was never physically present. Its power was amplified by belief, and belief, in turn, created real-world consequences. The spread of these rumors also created competition among rulers. Some sought to understand or acquire the cross, hoping to gain advantage in the endless game of dynastic politics. Others sought to suppress knowledge, fearing that awareness alone could destabilize their reign. Ambassadors, spies, and scholars became unwitting instruments in this invisible struggle. Kingdoms shifted alliances not based on armies or wealth alone, but on fragments of knowledge, cryptic visions, and interpretations of the Iron Cross whispered in corridors far from the battlefield. The unseen object, hidden and mysterious, became a force as influential as any general or strategist. Intrigue deepened as the cross's legend spread beyond borders. A ruler in the north might hear of a vision originating in a southern monastery, interpreted through multiple languages and retellings, yet it carried enough weight to alter policy. Messages were encoded to avoid misinterpretation, yet misinterpretation often occurred anyway, demonstrating the unpredictable human element. Scholars debated, spies intercepted, and rumors proliferated, creating a chaotic network in which the cross's influence expanded without ever moving physically. The object's presence was almost metaphysical, extending through human awareness rather than space, a silent puppeteer guiding events from shadows. Whispers were not always malicious. They carried hope as well as fear. A king might interpret a tale as divine guidance, redirecting resources to protect a city or forge alliances that avoided disaster. A general might retreat from a battle based on warnings embedded in stories of the cross, preventing the loss of thousands of lives. Even in misinterpretation, the cross exercised influence. It shaped caution, prudence, and moral reflection. The interplay between rumor, interpretation, and consequence illustrated a paradoxical truth. The cross was both invisible and omnipresent, subtle and decisive, feared and revered. However, the spread of these tales also had unintended consequences. Some individuals, driven by curiosity or greed, embarked on perilous journeys to find the cross, exposing themselves to danger. Rivalries erupted when multiple parties claimed insight into the prophecy, sometimes leading to bloodshed, imprisonment, or betrayal. And yet, these actions often reinforced the cross's power indirectly, as conflict, fear, and ambition demonstrated its presence without physical manifestation. The legend became self-perpetuating, its influence magnified by the very attempts to control or comprehend it. The whispers also highlighted the human tendency to see patterns where none might exist. Ambassadors reported visions, traders spoke of signs, and nobles made decisions based on fragmented tales, blurring the line between prophecy and coincidence. Yet the effect was real. Entire kingdoms could change course because of belief in the Iron Cross. History became a dance of perception and consequence, with the cross as the silent choreographer, guiding events through the shadows of rumor, imagination, and human ambition. Ultimately, the whispers across kingdoms ensured that the Iron Cross existed not merely as an object or prophecy, but as a force that transcended physical boundaries. Its presence was felt in the corridors of power, in the minds of rulers, and in the choices of individuals far removed from the object itself. Fear, hope, ambition, and curiosity became instruments through which the cross influenced the world. It was a master of subtlety, shaping history not through brute force, but through belief and perception, and teaching a lesson that would echo for centuries. The most powerful forces are often those we cannot see. The cross, through whispers alone, demonstrated a principle that would haunt generations. Control and understanding are never absolute. Knowledge brings both insight and peril, and perception can shape reality as profoundly as action. Those who encountered rumors of the Iron Cross were compelled to act, hesitate, or reflect, yet always under the weight of uncertainty. The cross thrived in this liminal space, invisible yet potent, a force both terrifying and compelling, a secret that could never be fully contained, and a mystery that would continue to haunt kingdoms, courts, and hearts across centuries. Where the Iron Cross spread its silent influence, human ambition followed swiftly, often tinged with greed, fear, and betrayal. Courts became powder kegs, where alliances were fragile and loyalties uncertain. Even the most trusted advisors, friends, and generals could be swayed by ambition or manipulated by whispers of the prophecy. The cross did not compel action directly, but its very presence, or the belief in it, exposed weakness, temptation, and the dark undercurrents of human nature. Every secret, every ambition became a potential instrument of its unseen power. One of the earliest recorded betrayals involved a knight who, driven by desire for recognition, attempted to leverage rumors of the Iron Cross to manipulate a king. He spread cryptic tales of visions and omens, claiming insight into the prophecy's guidance. Yet his manipulation backfired spectacularly. Miscommunication, mistrust, and paranoia spread through the court. Allies turned on each other, military campaigns faltered, and the knight himself vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving only whispers of his fate. The cross, though never physically present, had exercised its influence, revealing both ambition and folly with silent precision. Betrayal was rarely overt. It manifested subtly, often in hesitation, misdirection, or omission. A noble might withhold crucial information, convinced that doing so would curry favor with the forces behind the prophecy. An advisor might misinterpret a vision deliberately, steering policy in ways that benefited personal ambition. These acts of subtle treachery multiplied across kingdoms, creating a chain reaction that altered decisions, alliances, and battles. The Iron Cross, though unseen, had become a mirror, reflecting human flaws and magnifying their consequences. It did not act. Humans did, and through them, its power was realized. Courts, monasteries, and battlefields alike were infiltrated by this undercurrent of distrust. Kings, sensing unseen eyes and shadowed influence, grew suspicious of even their closest confidants. Decisions were second-guessed, letters scrutinized for hidden meaning, and whispers interpreted as omens. The cross's legend, amplified by secrecy and fear, had become a tool of manipulation in the hands of both the ambitious and the cautious. Even those who did not fully believe in the prophecy were affected by it, for human nature responds to uncertainty as fiercely as to danger. Some betrayals were rooted in desperation rather than greed. A ruler, fearing the consequences of ignoring the prophecy, might act hastily, alienating allies or punishing loyal subjects. A monk, seeking to protect manuscripts or knowledge, might hide or mislead others, inadvertently causing confusion or disaster. Each act of betrayal, whether deliberate or accidental, fed the legend, reinforcing the perception of the cross as a force that demanded caution, vigilance, and obedience. Over time, the human consequences of fear became intertwined with the supernatural aura of the prophecy itself. One striking example occurred during a succession crisis. Two brothers vied for the throne, each aware of the prophecy and the power it suggested. Rumors of visions, symbols, and the Iron Cross itself were leveraged as psychological weapons. Advisors were bribed, letters forged, and rumors spread to destabilize the rival faction. What might have been a straightforward political struggle became a labyrinth of deception, suspicion, and psychological warfare. Ultimately, the winner owed not only his victory to strategy and force, but also to the manipulation of belief, illustrating the subtle yet pervasive influence of the cross. Betrayal extended beyond individuals to entire factions. Monks sometimes manipulated interpretations of manuscripts to prevent a kingdom from gaining advantage, believing that misuse of the prophecy would invite disaster. Kings and nobles, in turn, plotted against each other to seize perceived knowledge or control. The Iron Cross became a silent referee, ensuring that ambition and betrayal carried real consequences. Those who sought to exploit it too eagerly were punished. Those who acted with caution often survived, and those who ignored it risked ruin. The legend created a dynamic interplay between human desire and unseen forces, a tension that shaped events in unpredictable ways. Interestingly, betrayal also highlighted the ethical dimension of the prophecy. Some individuals wrestled with conscience, torn between loyalty and ambition, faith and curiosity. Choices became moral as well as practical. A general might face a dilemma: act in the king's interest or follow what he believed the cross demanded. A monk might choose to protect manuscripts at the cost of exposing the secret to a ruler who could misuse it. The prophecy, in revealing human weaknesses, also forced reflection, testing character as much as intelligence. Each act of betrayal became a lesson in the dangers of overreach and the consequences of unchecked ambition. The psychological pressure created by the prophecy amplified human flaws. Individuals acted not only based on circumstance, but also on fear, suspicion, and desire for advantage. These internal struggles often manifested externally: whispered accusations, forged alliances, and secret plots. Even well-intentioned actors could become instruments of chaos. The Iron Cross, in remaining unseen, operated through human vulnerability, demonstrating a power that was subtle yet absolute. Through betrayal, it revealed a paradox. Control and influence were inseparable from the human capacity for error, temptation, and fear. Betrayal, in turn, reinforced secrecy. The keepers of the prophecy, aware of these risks, tightened their methods, encoded manuscripts more rigorously, and obscured knowledge from all but the most trusted. Yet no system was foolproof. Human ambition, curiosity, and desperation repeatedly found ways to circumvent precautions. This eternal tension between secrecy and exposure, between trust and treachery, became central to the Iron Cross's enduring power. The cross was not simply an object. It was a force acting through human minds, magnifying their flaws while offering glimpses of insight, wisdom, and revelation. Ultimately, the shadows of betrayal demonstrate that the Iron Cross was as much a mirror of humanity as it was a prophecy. It reflected fear, greed, ambition, and moral struggle, revealing truths that could not be ignored. Kingdoms shifted, lives were lost, and decisions were altered, not always by force, but by the subtle interplay of perception, rumor, and human desire. Betrayal was inevitable, yet it served the cross's purpose: to shape history quietly, invisibly, yet profoundly. The unseen force thrived precisely because humans acted, faltered, and conspired under its shadow, illustrating that the true power of the prophecy lay in its influence over minds and hearts. In the end, every act of betrayal, every whispered plot, every manipulation served to reinforce the legend. The Iron Cross was never fully revealed, yet its power persisted, an invisible hand shaping events, testing morality, and influencing ambition. Human flaws, magnified and directed, ensured that the prophecy remained a living force. Those who encountered it, or believed they had, were forever changed. The cross, through betrayal, demonstrated its most enduring lesson. The unseen is often the most potent force, and history is shaped as much by fear, deceit, and moral struggle as by swords and armies. Knowledge of the Iron Cross came at a cost. To touch its manuscripts, to interpret its symbols, or to even glimpse its legend was to invite a subtle, lingering burden. Those who sought understanding were rarely prepared for the psychological weight they would bear. Sleep became fitful, thoughts were invaded by fleeting images of the cross, and the line between reality and vision blurred. Scholars, monks, and even kings found that insight carried a price, one measured not in coin or rank, but in fear, obsession, and isolation. The curse was neither visible nor predictable. Some who read the blackened manuscripts experienced a creeping madness, a compulsion to decode every symbol, memorize every line, and trace every intricate illustration. Their lives narrowed to the singular task of comprehension, and even this focus provided only fleeting clarity. The Iron Cross, it seemed, demanded not just study, but surrender, an acceptance that full understanding might never be achieved, yet the pursuit itself would consume the mind, heart, and soul. Monks in remote abbeys documented these struggles in marginal notes and diaries, carefully encoding the experiences to warn future generations. One entry describes a scholar waking at midnight to find letters rearranged on the page, symbols shifting in patterns he could not reproduce. Another recounts dreams in which the cross floated over battlements, glowing with light that revealed victories and disasters simultaneously, leaving him unsure of what was real. Even when isolated from external interference, the curse persisted, haunting those who sought insight with visions and whispers, compounding their fear and reverence in equal measure. The curse also manifested in social isolation. Individuals obsessed with the prophecy withdrew from family, friends, and society, fearing that sharing knowledge could provoke catastrophe. Relationships withered under the strain of secrecy and fixation. Marriages failed, alliances dissolved, and advisors became distant, leaving scholars and keepers trapped in solitude. The Iron Cross was not merely a test of intellect, but of endurance, morality, and emotional resilience. Only those capable of sustaining focus without surrendering to despair or ambition could continue to serve as guardians or interpreters. Some attempted to circumvent the curse through collaboration, believing that shared knowledge could dilute its power. However, the very act of collaboration often intensified obsession. Differences in interpretation sparked debates that turned into arguments, arguments into suspicion, and suspicion into secrecy. When multiple individuals engaged with the prophecy, human flaws, pride, jealousy, fear became intertwined with the mystical influence of the cross. Attempts to distribute understanding only reinforced its subtle dominion, demonstrating that knowledge, when entwined with human desire, could never be fully contained or neutralized. The curse extended beyond perception and isolation. It influenced decisions in profound ways. A general consulting a manuscript might hesitate in battle, overanalyze strategy, or misinterpret an omen. A king might delay a crucial decision, worried that a vision foretold disaster. Even when guidance was heeded, outcomes could be unpredictable, as the cross operated not as a mechanical predictor, but as a force interacting with human intention. The curse, then, was inseparable from its utility. It offered insight, yet demanded careful navigation, humility, and moral consideration. Legends of the curse often highlighted extreme cases. One monk reportedly spent years alone in a crypt, studying diagrams and fragments of manuscripts until he emerged physically aged and mentally unstable, muttering verses that no one could comprehend. Another tale speaks of a noble woman who believed she foresaw battles and betrayals through visions of the cross. In her obsession, she alienated allies and lost her position, leaving a court destabilized and uncertain. These stories underscore the duality of knowledge. The Iron Cross provided extraordinary insight, yet even minor missteps could magnify human vulnerability, creating consequences that were immediate, severe, and sometimes irreversible. The curse was subtle in its moral dimension. Those who tried to exploit the prophecy for personal gain, whether through political power, military advantage, or wealth, often suffered indirect retribution. Manuscripts disappeared, messages were misinterpreted, and opportunities vanished. Conversely, individuals who approached the prophecy with humility, patience, and reverence often survived its psychological demands and occasionally glimpsed moments of illumination. The Iron Cross, in this sense, was as much a moral teacher as a mystical object, guiding human behavior through temptation, fear, and ethical testing. Interestingly, the curse had a recursive effect on history. Decisions influenced by obsession, hesitation, or fear altered the course of battles, diplomacy, and alliances. Kingdoms might rise or fall not through physical confrontation alone, but through the unseen influence of human interpretation of prophecy. A single scholar's vision, a monk's obsessive study, or a ruler's hesitation inspired by rumor could ripple across generations, producing consequences both subtle and monumental. In this way, the curse demonstrated that knowledge, once attained, could not be divorced from its effects on human action, perception, and ambition. Isolation, obsession, and moral tension were only part of the burden. Knowledge of the prophecy also invoked fear of exposure. Scholars and keepers understood that revealing insight, even inadvertently, could invite catastrophe, betrayal, or exploitation. Letters were coded, manuscripts hidden, and meetings conducted in secrecy, yet the risk of discovery was ever present. The curse was not merely a personal affliction. It imposed responsibility, vigilance, and restraint. To possess knowledge of the Iron Cross was to carry a silent accountability that extended far beyond the individual, touching kingdoms, armies, and ordinary lives alike. The curse was also generational. Guardians of the cross trained successors carefully, teaching caution, patience, and humility. Yet every new generation faced unique challenges. Human ambition, curiosity, and susceptibility to fear ensured that the psychological and ethical burden of knowledge remained constant. Each keeper, scholar, or observer had to navigate the prophecy anew, learning that understanding came at the cost of personal sacrifice. Failure to respect this burden often led to isolation, obsession, or disappearance. Through these cycles, the Iron Cross persisted not only as an object or legend, but as a force shaping human behavior across time. The emotional weight of the curse was immense. Obsession created profound tension between human desire for understanding and the recognition of personal limitation. Scholars, monks and nobles felt the pull of forbidden knowledge, the thrill of insight, and the dread of what might be revealed. Each glimpse of clarity was fleeting, often followed by confusion, doubt, or fear. In this way, the Iron Cross functioned as both teacher and tormentor, guiding understanding while testing endurance, morality, and emotional resilience. Those who endured emerged transformed, forever aware of the delicate balance between insight and madness. Ultimately, the curse of knowledge illustrates the Iron Cross's central paradox. It offered power, insight, and guidance, yet demanded vigilance, humility, and restraint. It shaped decisions, influenced perception, and revealed human vulnerability, proving that knowledge is never neutral. Every individual who encountered the prophecy, directly or indirectly, faced the weight of responsibility, the potential for obsession, and the consequences of choice. The cross, silent yet omnipresent, taught that insight comes with cost, and that true guardianship requires discipline, courage, and moral clarity. Even centuries later, echoes of the curse remain in history, in literature, and in legend. Scholars debate its authenticity, nobles recount its influence, and monasteries guard manuscripts whose content continues to inspire fear and fascination. The Iron Cross, though never fully revealed, endures as a symbol of the tension between human curiosity, ambition, and moral responsibility. Knowledge, it demonstrates, is a force capable of shaping destiny, and those who seek it must be prepared to pay the price. The Iron Cross and its manuscripts did not exist in isolation. They were housed in hidden sanctuaries, carefully chosen and fortified by the secret keepers. These places were as enigmatic as the prophecy itself. Remote abbeys tucked into dense forests, secluded towers perched on cliffs, and underground chambers beneath bustling cities. The sanctuaries were designed to protect knowledge, preserve the manuscripts, and safeguard anyone entrusted with the cross's secrets. Within these walls, time seemed suspended, shadows deepened, and the outside world felt distant, almost irrelevant. Access to the sanctuaries was tightly controlled. Only trusted individuals, thoroughly vetted and tested, could enter. Gates were guarded, hidden passages maintained, and the locations themselves often disguised in plain sight. Some sanctuaries appeared to be ordinary monasteries or abandoned castles, their significance invisible to all but the initiated. Even within the inner walls, every room, corridor, and cell was organized with purpose. Libraries to house fragile manuscripts, chambers for meditation and study, and hidden vaults where the most dangerous documents could be stored under lock and key. The sanctuaries were more than storage spaces. They were living environments that shaped the minds of those who dwelled within. Scholars, monks, and keepers found themselves influenced by the architecture, atmosphere, and isolation. Candlelight flickered across stone walls, casting shadows that seemed to move independently. The scent of old parchment and incense filled the air, connecting mind and memory in ways subtle yet profound. Each sanctuary was a crucible, refining perception, focus, and moral discernment. Time moved differently within these walls, and visitors often lost track of days, consumed by manuscripts, visions, and contemplation. Security within these sanctuaries was both physical and mystical. Traps and hidden mechanisms ensured that unauthorized entry was nearly impossible, but the keepers also relied on the psychological influence of the cross. Those who approached without proper intent reported unease, anxiety, or inexplicable hesitation. Some claimed to see fleeting visions of the Iron Cross suspended in air, while others experienced the sensation of being watched by unseen forces. The sanctuaries themselves seemed attuned to the cross, acting as extensions of its will, reinforcing its power even in the absence of direct observation. Not all sanctuaries were static. Some were relocated periodically to avoid detection. Manuscripts were transported in secret, often at great personal risk, through forests, rivers, and mountain passes. Couriers and keepers employed disguise, stealth, and deception, aware that discovery could lead to theft, betrayal, or destruction. Each relocation was meticulously planned, with contingencies for delay, interception, or ambush. The network of sanctuaries thus became a living, adaptive system, ensuring the survival of the prophecy and the manuscripts across decades, centuries, and political upheaval. The sanctuaries also served as centers of teaching and initiation. New keepers underwent rigorous trials within these walls, learning to interpret manuscripts, navigate visions, and resist the obsession and psychological pressure inherent in the prophecy. These trials were both practical and spiritual, deciphering cryptic symbols, meditating on visions, and facing moral dilemmas designed to test character and discipline. Success was not measured by speed or intellect alone, but by humility, patience, and the ability to act with caution under the weight of knowledge. Failure often resulted in removal, exile, or disappearance, reinforcing the sanctity and danger of the cross. Within these hidden spaces, stories of past keepers persisted. Names were whispered, achievements recorded in coded inscriptions, and lessons inscribed in marginalia. The sanctuaries became repositories not just of manuscripts, but of history, memory, and warning. Every wall, shelf, and corridor held echoes of those who had come before, a living archive of experience, caution, and reverence. Visitors often reported feeling the presence of these predecessors, as though the very stone and parchment carried the weight of their dedication, vigilance, and sacrifice. Isolation in the sanctuaries was both protective and challenging. Keepers often experienced profound solitude, their interactions limited to others within the inner circle. Communication with the outside world was rare, strictly controlled, and carefully monitored. This solitude amplified focus, but also heightened the psychological demands of the cross. Dreams and visions became more vivid. Every whisper, shadow, or flicker of candlelight was imbued with significance. The sanctuaries were both sanctuary and crucible, nurturing comprehension while testing endurance and morality. The architecture itself reflected symbolic design, echoing themes from the manuscripts. Stairways spiraled upward. Chambers were arranged in patterns reflecting sacred geometry, and hidden alcoves contained inscriptions in forgotten languages. These designs were intended to guide perception, sharpen intuition, and encourage reflection. Scholars and keepers reported that moving through these spaces evoked insight and contemplation, yet also a subtle sense of caution, as though the sanctuaries themselves reminded them that the cross's power demanded respect. The interplay between physical environment and mystical influence reinforced the cross's presence, even in silence. Sanctuaries were not immune to danger. Raiders, rival factions, or ambitious rulers sometimes discovered hints of their existence, leading to attempted theft or assault. In such cases, the keepers relied on secrecy, misdirection, and the psychological influence of the cross. Legends tell of attackers abandoning their quest, overcome by fear, disorientation, or sudden visions. Other tales recount manuscripts hidden just in time, their contents protected by ingenuity, courage, and sheer will. These stories became part of the mythology surrounding the Iron Cross, reinforcing its aura of invincibility and unseen power. Importantly, Sanctuaries also preserved the human element of the prophecy. Within these walls, monks, scholars, and keepers formed bonds, shared insights, and guided each other through moral and psychological challenges. Rituals, meditations, and collaborative study reinforced community while respecting the demands of secrecy. The sanctuaries, therefore, were not merely repositories of knowledge, but spaces where human connection, discipline, and reverence were cultivated, ensuring that the prophecy could be interpreted responsibly and passed down across generations. The enduring legacy of these sanctuaries is evident even centuries later. Many have been lost to time, destroyed in wars, or abandoned to decay, yet traces remain. Hidden passages, cryptic inscriptions, and faint echoes in historical records. Modern scholars occasionally stumble upon remnants, sensing the meticulous care, architectural symbolism, and moral purpose embedded in their construction. Even in ruins, the sanctuaries evoke awe, reverence, and a sense of mystery, reminding us that the Iron Cross was guarded not only by manuscripts, but by environments crafted to shape human thought, protect sacred knowledge, and challenge those who dare to engage with it. Ultimately, the sanctuaries represent the intersection of human ingenuity, devotion, and the mystical influence of the Iron Cross. They are physical and psychological spaces designed to preserve knowledge, protect custodians, and ensure that the prophecy survived despite the chaos of history. Within these hidden walls, the cross exerted subtle power, shaping perception, testing morality, and preparing generations to carry its secrets forward. They remain enduring symbols of the delicate balance between revelation and danger, secrecy and insight, human endeavor and the mysteries that transcend it. Within the hidden sanctuaries, the delicate balance between vigilance and ambition often collided, producing tension that was as human as it was dangerous. The keepers of the Iron Cross were entrusted with the weight of a prophecy that could alter kingdoms, yet they were not immune to desire, envy, or doubt. Some devoted themselves fully to stewardship, embracing humility and discipline, while others succumbed to temptation, seeking power, recognition, or forbidden knowledge. The line between guardian and betrayer was thinner than most imagined, and crossing it could have devastating consequences. The early years of the Secret Order were particularly perilous. Novices, eager to prove their worth, sometimes acted impulsively, attempting to decode manuscripts beyond their comprehension. Misinterpretation of symbols or visions could lead to misguided advice, dangerous decisions, or inadvertent exposure of the prophecy. In several documented instances, such actions resulted in the loss of manuscripts or the premature revelation of knowledge to rulers or rival factions. The Iron Cross, through these errors, demonstrated a subtle yet relentless influence. The human flaws of its custodians were amplified, magnified, and mirrored in history itself. Trust among keepers was therefore fragile and meticulously tested. Initiates underwent trials designed to measure loyalty, judgment, and resilience. They were observed not only in study, but in moments of temptation, crisis, and moral challenge. Would a monk reveal a secret for personal gain? Would a noble prioritize ambition over prudence? Would a scholar succumb to obsession and neglect the broader responsibility? Only those who demonstrated unwavering integrity were allowed to access the most sensitive manuscripts or participate in strategic decision-making regarding the cross. Even minor lapses could result in removal, exile, or permanent isolation, reinforcing the sanctity of knowledge and the weight of stewardship. Yet betrayal was inevitable. Human ambition, fear, and desire often overcame discipline, no matter how rigorous the training. Some keepers attempted to exploit the prophecy, believing they could control its influence for personal gain. Others acted out of desperation, fear of exposure, or misguided morality. One notable example involved a monk who, convinced that a kingdom would misuse the prophecy, deliberately misled an advisor. The deception, intended to protect knowledge, inadvertently sparked a military conflict, proving that even well-intentioned betrayal carried profound consequences. These events became cautionary tales, reinforcing the need for restraint, humility, and ethical vigilance. Interestingly, the interplay between guardians and betrayers created a dynamic system in which the prophecy could remain hidden yet influential. Betrayal tested the mechanisms of secrecy, revealing vulnerabilities in manuscripts, sanctuaries, and communication networks. Guardians responded with innovation, adapting encryption, relocation strategies, and symbolic obfuscation to preserve the cross. In this way, the tension between loyalty and ambition strengthened the system, ensuring its survival even amid human frailty. The cross, unseen yet potent, leveraged human flaws to fortify its legacy, demonstrating that its power was as psychological as it was mystical. The psychological complexity of the Keeper's world was immense. Those who remained loyal experienced isolation, fear, and moral burden, constantly aware that a single error could invite catastrophe. Those who betrayed, consciously or unconsciously, wrestled with guilt, fear of exposure, and the consequences of their ambition. Even the most disciplined custodians were haunted by doubt. Did the prophecy demand an action or intervention? Was a failure to act a betrayal in itself? These questions shaped every decision, every interpretation, and every moment spent in proximity to the cross, illustrating that the prophecy's influence extended far beyond manuscripts into the very hearts of its human custodians. Alliances within the sanctuaries were complicated by hierarchy, knowledge, and perception. The shadow of the Iron Cross stretched far beyond isolated sanctuaries and whispered legends. It crept into the chaos and fervor of the Crusades. As armies marched across deserts, rivers, and mountains, the prophecy found fertile ground in the hearts of warriors, pilgrims, and kings alike. Tales of a cross that could alter destiny, inspire victory, or curse defeat circulated among soldiers, inspiring awe, fear, and fanaticism. Each rumor became a tool, wielded by leaders and envoys to manipulate morale, justify campaigns, or strengthen faith in the face of insurmountable odds. Crusaders were no strangers to mysticism, yet the Iron Cross inspired a new intensity of belief. Soldiers claimed to see its symbol in visions before battles, glowing faintly on banners, shields, or the horizon itself. These visions, though likely subjective, had tangible effects. Warriors fought with heightened courage, commanders hesitated with caution, and entire armies shifted tactics based on fleeting impressions. Even the mere belief that the cross watched over them influenced decisions on the battlefield, blurring the line between divine guidance, superstition, and strategic calculation. Commanders quickly realized that rumors could be weaponized. Whispered tales of the cross's favor or wrath influenced not only morale, but also alliances. A kingdom believed to be blessed might attract reinforcements, while one rumored to be cursed could face desertion or rebellion. Diplomats and spies spread selective accounts of visions, strategic advice, or omens, each tailored to manipulate perception. The Iron Cross, though unseen, became a silent general, influencing outcomes through human psychology rather than direct intervention, proving that belief could be as decisive as force. Yet the Crusades were also a proving ground for betrayal and ambition, themes inseparable from the prophecy. Knights, monks, and advisors leveraged knowledge, or rumor, of the cross to advance their own interests. Some attempted to intercept manuscripts, hoping to wield insight for personal gain. Others manipulated visions, spreading misleading interpretations to destabilize rivals or gain favor with rulers. In multiple accounts, decisions influenced by such interference resulted in unexpected victories or devastating losses, illustrating that the cross's influence extended through human choice, magnifying both wisdom and folly. Religious orders became both protectors and opportunists. Monks traveling with armies carefully guarded manuscripts, while simultaneously interpreting the cross to suit moral, political, or strategic ends. Some took extreme measures, interpreting visions as divine mandates to act decisively, even violently, against those deemed unworthy or disloyal. The line between guidance and manipulation blurred, and the consequences were profound. Battles were won or lost, cities besieged or spared, and alliances forged or broken, all under the invisible psychological influence of the Iron Cross. The psychological toll on participants was severe. Soldiers reported restless nights, haunted by visions of crosses suspended in fire or shadow. Commanders wrestled with doubt, unsure whether to trust intuition, counsel, or omen. Pilgrims claimed to witness fleeting illuminations, signaling favor or warning of peril. These experiences, real or imagined, shaped behavior, proving that the Iron Cross's power was as much about perception as it was about prophecy. Every fear, hesitation, and surge of courage was magnified, creating a subtle yet profound influence over the chaos of war. Stories from the battlefield often contained moral lessons, demonstrating that knowledge of the prophecy carried responsibility. Knights who ignored visions or acted selfishly suffered defeat or disgrace. Commanders who interpreted omens with humility and prudence occasionally gained advantage, yet always at the cost of vigilance, discipline, and restraint. These tales reinforced the dual nature of the Iron Cross. It offered insight and power, yet demanded ethical engagement, caution, and moral clarity. The Crusades, in this way, became both a proving ground and a cautionary tale for those who engaged with its secrets. Interestingly, the cross's influence extended across geographic and cultural boundaries. Crusaders encountering foreign kingdoms observed similar signs and symbols, adapting interpretations to local traditions. Rumors of the cross spread along trade routes, military campaigns, and diplomatic missions, touching distant lands where it became woven into local legends. Each reinterpretation preserved the core mystery while adapting to new audiences, creating a web of influence that transcended national, linguistic, and religious divides. The Iron Cross became not just a European phenomenon, but a force of perception, shaping belief and behavior across continents. The Crusades also amplified the interplay of guardians and betrayers. Manuscripts moved with armies, safeguarded by loyal monks, yet constantly threatened by spies, opportunists, and ambitious knights. Some custodians manipulated knowledge, interpreting visions to justify actions or consolidate power. Others acted out of fear, hiding or misrepresenting information to prevent misuse. The result was a complex network of influence, secrecy, and human psychology in which every decision, whether moral or self-serving, affected outcomes in unpredictable ways. The cross, unseen and silent, orchestrated consequences through human agency, proving its subtle yet absolute power. Echoes of the prophecy persisted long after individual battles. Chronicles, letters, and marginal notes preserved accounts of visions, warnings, and outcomes linked to the cross. Even when physical manuscripts were lost, fragments survived in storytelling, ritual, and memory, ensuring that the legend endured. These echoes served both as guidance and warning, reinforcing the psychological power of the cross and its capacity to influence future generations. Knowledge, once glimpsed, could never be fully erased, and its effects rippled far beyond the battlefield. The emotional intensity of the Crusades magnified the Iron Cross's influence. Fear, hope, and desperation were heightened by proximity to death and the chaos of war. Visions and rumors became lifelines or instruments of dread, shaping decisions in ways tangible and intangible. Soldiers, scholars, and commanders alike were drawn into the prophecy's orbit, often without recognizing it. The cross, though absent, orchestrated outcomes through perception, human ambition, and belief, demonstrating that the most profound power can be subtle, invisible, and psychological. Ultimately, the Crusades illustrate the Iron Cross's enduring principle. Knowledge, belief, and human psychology are inseparable from action and consequence. The cross, hidden yet omnipresent, shaped events, inspired courage, and exposed flaw. Its influence was not absolute, yet it was undeniable, weaving its subtle hand into the tapestry of history. Warriors, monks, and rulers learned that the unseen could be as potent as the visible, and that destiny, perception, and human choice were bound together in ways both miraculous and perilous. Even centuries later, historians and storytellers trace the Iron Cross's echoes in accounts of battles, sieges, and diplomatic maneuvers. The legend persists, not as a tangible object alone, but as a force that shaped perception, guided behavior, and revealed the intricate interplay of human ambition, fear, and morality. The Crusades, with their mixture of faith, violence, and uncertainty, remain a testament to the cross's subtle yet profound power, reminding us that even unseen forces can define the course of history. At the heart of the Iron Cross's enduring legend were the forbidden manuscripts, texts so rare and cryptic that their very existence inspired fear, reverence, and obsession. These manuscripts were not mere collections of writing. They were carefully constructed compendiums of prophecy, symbol, and hidden instruction, each layered with meaning accessible only to those trained in the secret traditions of the keepers. To touch them was to step into a world of possibility and peril, where insight and madness walked hand in hand. The manuscripts were painstakingly preserved on delicate parchment, bound with materials that resisted decay yet symbolized sacred secrecy. Illuminated letters glimmered faintly in candlelight, depicting crosses, intricate geometric patterns, and scenes of enigmatic events whose significance was known only to the initiated. Marginal notes, written in ciphered script, warned of consequences for misinterpretation and outlined trials for aspiring custodians. Every page was both a vessel of knowledge and a test of the reader's patience, discernment, and moral resolve. Access was tightly controlled. Only the most trusted keepers, often after decades of rigorous training and trials, could interact directly with the manuscripts. Even then, they were instructed to handle them with reverence, often consulting multiple sources to ensure accurate interpretation. Mistakes were not merely intellectual. They were dangerous, capable of triggering misjudgments, political missteps, or even psychological collapse. In some cases, entire campaigns were altered by the careful or careless reading of these texts, proving that knowledge of the cross carried consequences far beyond the confines of sanctuary. Some manuscripts were deliberately deceptive, layered with false paths, ambiguous symbols, and conflicting interpretations. This was not to punish the reader, but to safeguard the prophecy from exploitation. Only those who approached the texts with humility, patience, and ethical clarity could navigate the layers of truth. Others, driven by ambition or fear, often misinterpreted instructions, creating confusion, miscommunication, and sometimes catastrophe. In this way, the manuscripts acted as both guide and gatekeeper, ensuring that insight was earned, not seized. The creation of these texts involved a combination of mystical symbolism, historical knowledge, and coded language. Scholars embedded layers of meaning, using allegory, numerology, and visual motifs to convey instruction, warning, and revelation. Battles, visions, and moral dilemmas were encoded within these symbols, allowing readers to interpret both immediate and long-term consequences. Even partial understanding could be transformative, influencing decisions, perception, and action. Yet complete comprehension was nearly unattainable, preserving the manuscript's mystery and the prophecy's power across generations. Handling these manuscripts was never without risk. Stories abound of scholars and keepers who became obsessed, poring over pages for days or weeks without rest. Their dreams were invaded by visions of the Iron Cross, sometimes predictive, sometimes terrifyingly ambiguous. Sleep became erratic, thoughts fragmented, and the boundary between reality and vision blurred. Some fell into madness, while others withdrew from society entirely, consumed by the need to interpret, understand, or safeguard the texts. The manuscripts demanded not just intelligence, but psychological endurance, moral integrity, and spiritual resilience. The manuscripts also served as instruments of control. Knowledge contained within them could be leveraged to influence rulers, armies, and advisors. A correct interpretation might provide guidance in battle or political maneuvering. A misreading could bring disaster. Some keepers, aware of this dual potential, selectively revealed insights, balancing the benefits of guidance against the risks of exposure. The manuscripts were thus both weapon and safeguard, their power inseparable from the wisdom, ethics, and judgment of those entrusted with them. Among the countless tales surrounding the Iron Cross, few inspired as much fear and fascination as the account of the cursed pilgrimage, a journey that began in faith but ended in ruin. It was said to have taken place during one of the later Crusades, when a small band of nobles, monks, and soldiers set out from the coast of France, claiming divine instruction to locate the resting light of the cross. What began as a sacred mission soon descended into paranoia, betrayal, and inexplicable tragedy, leaving behind fragments of letters, chronicles, and symbols that would haunt history for centuries. The origins of the pilgrimage remain obscure. Some sources claim the group's leader, a knight named Armand de Clermont, experienced a vision after surviving a near-fatal wound in battle. He awoke claiming that a radiant cross appeared before him, whispering of redemption and revelation. The vision commanded him to seek a hidden relic buried in the east, an object that would confirm the prophecy of the Iron Cross and usher in a new era of divine enlightenment. Others, however, whispered that Armand's vision was born not of faith but of fever, an illusion conjured by guilt and exhaustion. Whatever the truth, his conviction was unshakable. Armand gathered a small company of followers, scholars versed in prophecy, monks sworn to secrecy, and soldiers devoted to the cause. Among them was a woman named Isabel of Anjou, a healer and chronicler who would later record fragments of their journey. Her writings, preserved in partial form, suggests that she doubted the mission's purpose even as she followed it faithfully. She described Armand as a man torn between holiness and obsession, driven by something greater than reason. He no longer seeks God, she wrote, but something that pretends to be him. Their route took them through desolate landscapes, mountain passes, ruined monasteries, and plague-stricken villages, where faith was tested by hunger, fear, and isolation. Along the way, strange events began to unfold. Compasses failed, stars shifted, and a recurring symbol, a blackened cross encircled by flame, appeared on stones and walls where no hand could have drawn it. The group began to divide between those who saw these as signs of divine favor and those who believed they were warnings to turn back. The tension grew unbearable, fueled by exhaustion and fear of the unseen. Isabel's account describes nights filled with haunting dreams. She wrote of seeing a great iron cross floating above a burning sea, its reflection distorted and endless. Voices whispered promises of truth and power, demanding trust and obedience. When she awoke, others had shared similar dreams, their details eerily consistent. The pilgrims began to believe that they were being watched, not by enemies, but by the prophecy itself. The cross, once a symbol of faith, became a mirror of their inner fears and desires. As the pilgrimage pressed eastward, unity dissolved. Hunger bred suspicion. Exhaustion fed resentment. One monk, overcome by doubt, attempted to destroy their maps and turn the group back. He was found dead the next morning, his body arranged in the shape of a cross, though no one claimed responsibility. Another member vanished entirely, leaving behind only a single page from a manuscript describing the Iron Cross as the shadow of revelation. Isabel's writings suggest that by this point, the group had begun to lose their grip on reality. What had started as a spiritual mission had become a descent into collective delirium. Armand, increasingly withdrawn, insisted that they were close. His eyes, once filled with determination, now reflected an unrelenting fever. He spoke less of God and more of destiny, claiming that the cross was testing them, purifying them through suffering. The faithful must be broken, he declared, so that they may be remade. His followers, torn between devotion and terror, continued to march under his command, driven by fear of divine retribution should they abandon the quest. The pilgrimage reached its breaking point near the ruins of an ancient monastery in Anatolia. There, according to Isabel's fragmented account, they discovered a sealed chamber beneath the earth. Inside, they found not a relic, but a series of stone tablets engraved with the same enigmatic symbols found in the forbidden manuscripts. At the center of the chamber stood a cross of dark metal, etched with unfamiliar script. It pulsed faintly in the torchlight, as though alive. The sight drove several to their knees, weeping. Others screamed and fled into the night. Isabel wrote that Armand approached the cross, murmuring prayers that shifted into words none could recognize. The air grew heavy. The torches flickered. The sound of metal against stone echoed, as if the cross itself responded. Then came a blinding light and silence. When Isabel regained consciousness, the chamber was empty. The cross was gone. Armand's sword lay upon the ground, twisted as though melted by heat. Of the 20 who had begun the pilgrimage, only 4 survived the return journey, each haunted, silent, and broken. In later centuries, the Church condemned the tale as heresy. Yet fragments of their story survived, in sermons, in letters, in whispered accounts among secret orders. Some claimed the Iron Cross punished the pilgrims for their arrogance. Others believed it granted them visions too profound for mortal minds. Isabel's remaining writings hint at a darker truth, that the prophecy itself demanded sacrifice, feeding on faith and folly alike to preserve its secrecy. Her final line, written in trembling script, reads simply, "The cross does not choose the faithful, it consumes them." The cursed pilgrimage became a warning among keepers and scholars alike. It demonstrated that the pursuit of revelation without humility leads to ruin, and that prophecy, when approached as conquest, transforms faith into madness. The survivors were said to have lived in silence, their eyes reflecting horrors unseen by ordinary men. Some claimed to hear whispers in their sleep, as if the cross continued to speak through them, echoing across generations. Though historians debate the authenticity of the account, the psychological truth remains undeniable. The cursed pilgrimage reveals the human tendency to mistake obsession for faith and ambition for destiny. The Iron Cross, whether real or symbolic, became a mirror to those who sought it, revealing not divine truth, but the reflection of their own desires, fears, and corruption. Centuries later, when new manuscripts surfaced containing references to the lost pilgrimage, scholars noticed something extraordinary. Marginal notes in one text, written centuries after the event, described a vision identical to Isabel's, the cross hovering above a sea of fire. It seemed the echoes of that doomed journey had never faded. The Iron Cross continued to reach across time, reminding those who sought its truth that enlightenment and destruction often share the same path. As the winds swept over the ancient plains, the soft murmur of forgotten ages seemed to drift through the tall grass. Beneath the fading sun, Marcus held in his trembling hands the map that had haunted his lineage for centuries. It was no ordinary parchment. It was said to reveal pathways not just across land, but across time itself. The map shimmered faintly, as if inked with light drawn from the stars. Its symbols pulsed, shifting subtly, alive with the whispers of centuries that refused to die. Marcus could feel the weight of history pressing upon him, an invisible current drawing him closer to its secret. He unfolded the brittle surface carefully, tracing the strange patterns with reverence. Each line seemed to breathe, bending as if reacting to his pulse. The map bore markings no scholar could translate, circular runes, constellations unfamiliar even to the astronomers of Rome, and shapes resembling temples submerged in myth. Yet as Marcus stared, something within him recognized them, as though buried memories stirred awake. It was not knowledge learned, but inherited, running through his blood like a dormant spark. The legend spoke of a Chronos path, a hidden trail that allowed one to step between the boundaries of time's flow. Some claimed it was a divine illusion. Others swore it was a curse meant to test the limits of mortal ambition. Night deepened, and the stars mirrored the very constellations etched upon the map. Marcus realized the heavens themselves were aligning, guiding him to a place where moments could overlap, where the past could breathe again. He followed the celestial clues until he reached the ruins of an old fortress, half buried beneath vines and stone. The ground was cold, humming faintly beneath his feet. He unrolled the map once more, and suddenly, a faint blue radiance emerged from its surface, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air thickened, bending with a rhythm older than memory. Marcus took a hesitant step forward, and the ruins shifted before his eyes, transforming into towering marble walls bathed in the glow of torches. He gasped. The fortress was no longer a ruin, it was alive. Soldiers in Roman armor moved past him, their banners glinting with emblems lost to time. He realized he had crossed the threshold of centuries. The map had opened a gate, a bridge connecting the echoes of history to the living present. Marcus clutched the parchment tighter, his heart pounding with awe and terror. He was walking through the living memory of the Empire, through moments that had shaped the world. The air smelled of iron and oil. Distant voices carried commands in Latin, sharp and steady. Every heartbeat drew him deeper into the timeline's pulse. In the courtyard stood an altar adorned with golden symbols identical to those on his map. He approached cautiously, placing the parchment upon its surface. The map pulsed again, brighter this time, and the symbols on the altar responded, glowing in unison. A voice echoed, not from any throat, but from the fabric of the air itself. "You bear the seal of those who listened when the stars still spoke," it said. Marcus could not move. The voice continued, "Time is not a river, it is a circle. The path you seek is not forward, but inward." The words struck him with unsettling clarity. He understood then that the map was not merely an artifact. It was a mirror, a reflection of his own spirit's journey through lifetimes. Visions unfolded around him, fragments of Rome's past. Emperors rising and falling, cities built and burned, men chasing immortality through conquest and faith. Each vision flickered like a candle in the wind, blending one age into another. He saw himself, or rather, his soul, reborn in each era, carrying the same map, repeating the same quest. It was not destiny, but choice that bound him to this endless cycle. The map was his creation, drawn long ago as both a guide and a prison. Now, he realized the only way to break free was to find where the circle ended. The altar began to tremble, and the voice faded into a whisper. "The end is where the beginning hides." The map's glow intensified, its lines shifting rapidly until a single new path appeared, pointing toward the mountains beyond the fortress. Marcus followed it without hesitation, passing through shifting landscapes that flickered between ancient and modern. Forests became ruins, ruins became cities, and the stars above turned endlessly like gears in a celestial clock. Time lost its meaning. Every step felt both ancient and new, like walking through a dream that refused to wake. At last, he reached a stone archway carved with the same runes that had haunted the edges of his map. A pool of still water lay beneath it, reflecting the sky in perfect silence. As he approached, the reflection changed. It showed not the night sky, but his younger self, standing in a different age, holding the same map with the same wonder. The reflection spoke softly, "You drew me once. You sought what could not be contained." Marcus knelt by the water, understanding dawning like sunrise. The map was never meant to lead him elsewhere. It was meant to lead him back, to remember the moment he first sought to control time instead of learning from it. He pressed the map into the water. The parchment dissolved, light spreading through the pool like dawn. The archway began to hum, and the ground trembled beneath him. The world blurred again, folding upon itself until he stood once more in the present ruins, the stars dimming overhead. The map was gone, but a faint mark glowed upon his palm, a circular symbol, the same as those on the altar. The voice echoed one last time, "Time bends to those who listen, not to those who command." Marcus exhaled, the weight of countless ages finally lifting. Around him, the night felt still, sacred. He understood now that the true map was not written on parchment, but within the memory of every soul that dared to remember where it had been. As he turned away from the ruins, the first light of dawn crept across the horizon, and for the first time in his many lifetimes, Marcus walked without looking back. The circle had closed, and in doing so, had finally set him free. The air was thick with the scent of iron and dust, the kind that clings to stone corridors long after the blood has dried. Marcus stood beneath the dim torchlight of the old Roman citadel, his reflection glimmering faintly on a bronze shield mounted to the wall. He had walked this path before, yet tonight every step felt heavier, every echo sharper. Betrayal has a sound, quiet, deliberate, like a dagger sliding free of its sheath. And somewhere in these shadows, that sound awaited him. He had trusted Lucian more than any man alive. They had fought side by side through battles that bent empires, sworn brotherhood under the watch of dying stars, and shared dreams of a Rome that would never fade. But dreams, like empires, have a way of rotting from within. Marcus had seen the first signs, letters sealed in haste, conversations that silenced when he entered the room, and orders delivered with trembling urgency. Now, as he descended deeper into the fortress, the truth began to whisper from the walls. At the heart of the chamber stood a table scattered with maps, coins, and scrolls. Plans for a rebellion he was never meant to see. Names he recognized were inked in red, including his own. His chest tightened. Lucian's handwriting coiled across the parchment like a serpent. Each line was a confession. It detailed an assassination, the timing, and the price. Marcus traced the ink with his finger until he reached the final signature. Lucian. The man who had once saved his life now sought to take it. Behind him, the door creaked. "You were never meant to see that," Lucian's voice said, calm and measured, the tone of a man who had already accepted his choice. Marcus turned slowly, meeting the gaze of his oldest friend. The torchlight flickered between them, throwing gold against Lucian's cold eyes. "Why?" Marcus asked. "Was the loyalty we swore worth nothing to you?" Lucian stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his dagger. "Loyalty," he said with quiet contempt. "Rome changes, Marcus. You cling to ghosts. The world doesn't remember the loyal, it remembers the victors." The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt the betrayal pierce deeper than any blade could. "I would have died for you," he said. "And now you will," Lucian replied, his tone almost sorrowful. The dagger flashed in his hand, and the fight began, not a clash of enemies, but of brothers broken by ambition. Metal rang against metal as sparks scattered across the floor. The chamber echoed with the fury of 1,000 unspoken memories. Marcus's movements were deliberate, heavy with grief rather than rage. Lucian's strikes were precise, quick, desperate. They knew each other too well. Each attack anticipated, each defense mirrored. Their blades locked, inches from each other's throats. "You were always stronger," Lucian hissed, but never smarter. With a twist, he forced Marcus back against the table, scattering the treacherous plans across the stone floor. In the chaos, Lucian lunged. The dagger grazed Marcus's shoulder, drawing blood, but Marcus countered with a blow to Lucian's chest that sent him staggering. "This isn't strength," Marcus said through clenched teeth. "It's cowardice disguised as reason." Lucian laughed bitterly. "Cowardice keeps men alive." The final strike came sudden and silent. Lucian stepped forward for one last attack, but Marcus caught his arm, turning his own blade inward. The dagger pierced Lucian's heart. The sound was small, a whisper of finality. For a moment, time stood still. Lucian's expression softened, surprise flickering into something almost peaceful. "I thought I could save Rome," he breathed, blood rising in his throat. Marcus held him as he sank to his knees. "You killed it," Marcus whispered. Lucian's hand fell limp, and the light faded from his eyes. The dagger slipped from Marcus's grasp, clattering onto the stones that had witnessed countless oaths and betrayals. Silence reclaimed the room. Outside, the wind howled against the fortress walls like a ghost mourning the fall of its keeper. Marcus stood alone, drenched in his friend's blood, feeling neither victory nor relief, only the hollow ache of inevitability. The map of rebellion lay torn beneath his boots, the ink smudged by drops of crimson. He carried Lucian's body to the courtyard, laying it beneath the withered laurel tree they had once planted together after their first campaign. The moonlight bathed the corpse in pale silver, erasing the face of the traitor and leaving only the shadow of the friend he had once been. Marcus knelt beside him, whispering a prayer he could barely remember. "Forgive me," he murmured, though he wasn't sure who he was asking, Lucian, the gods, or himself. The stars offered no answer. The fortress around him felt alive with ghosts. He could almost hear their voices, soldiers who had died believing in honor, senators who traded loyalty for survival, lovers who whispered promises they could not keep. Betrayal, he realized, was Rome's truest language. It was written in its history, carved into its marble, sung in its victories. He looked down at his bloodstained hands and saw not just Lucian's death, but the death of everything they had fought for. When dawn came, Marcus walked through the gates alone. The world outside felt unfamiliar, as though time itself had shifted in those long hours of blood and silence. The city awaited news of rebellion, unaware that its spark had been extinguished in a single, quiet act of murder. He carried the weight of it like a shadow that would never fade. Rumors would spread, that Lucian vanished, that Marcus betrayed him, that both had fallen to madness. The truth, as always, would rot between the cracks of legend. As he crossed the river, Marcus paused, pulling the dagger from his belt, the same dagger that had ended his brother's life. He stared at its blade, glinting in the morning sun. There was no glory in its shine, only memory. He tossed it into the water, watching it vanish beneath the current. The ripples spread outward, carrying his guilt into the depths. He turned away, his reflection breaking apart on the surface. Behind him, the fortress loomed against the light, a monument to friendship and treachery alike. Marcus knew he could never return. Some wounds don't heal. They become monuments of their own, silent, eternal reminders of what loyalty costs in a world ruled by ambition. As he disappeared into the horizon, the wind carried with it a single truth carved in pain. In Rome, murder was not the end of loyalty, it was its final act. The forest was still when Marcus awoke, the morning light seeping through the canopy in thin, golden threads. Dew clung to his armor like tears of glass, glimmering against the worn iron. His body ached from wounds that no medicine could truly heal, and though his sword lay beside him, he no longer reached for it. The river murmured nearby, carrying away the last fragments of the night, the blood, the memories, the name of a brother now lost to both history and forgiveness. He had left Rome behind, or at least the idea of it. What remained was a ghost empire, one that lived only in whispers and regrets. Every step Marcus took through the wilderness felt like walking through the ruins of his own soul. He had been a knight, a protector of an ideal that once seemed divine. But after Lucian's death, the word honor rang hollow. It had been forged by men like them, men who lied, killed, and called it virtue. Days turned to weeks as Marcus wandered without purpose, his armor gathering rust, his cloak frayed and torn. The locals who caught glimpses of him spoke of a spirit haunting the northern roads, a man cloaked in silence, carrying sorrow like a relic. Some said he was cursed by the gods. Others believed he was searching for redemption. Marcus never corrected them. The truth, he thought, was worse. He was simply lost. One evening, as twilight bled into the woods, Marcus reached a small village built on the edge of a forgotten monastery. Smoke curled from the chimneys, carrying the scent of pine and bread. For the first time in months, He heard laughter, children chasing each other through the mud, a woman humming as she hung laundry beneath the fading sun. He watched from a distance, feeling a pain he couldn't name. This, he thought, was the world he had fought for. Peaceful, fragile, and utterly unaware of the wars waged in its name. As night fell, he found himself drawn to the monastery on the hill. Its gates were cracked and weathered, carved with symbols of the old faith, the same cross that had once gleamed upon his armor, now nearly erased by time. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of incense and dust. Candles flickered along the altar, tended by an old monk who turned as Marcus entered. "You were the look of a man carrying ghosts," the monk said quietly, studying him with eyes both kind and knowing. Marcus bowed his head. "I've carried worse," he replied, his voice hollow. The monk smiled faintly. "All burdens feel eternal until you lay them down." They sat together in silence for a long while. Marcus spoke little, but the monk seemed to sense what words could not express: the grief, the betrayal, the unhealed wound of killing one's brother. "You've seen death," the monk said finally, "and perhaps you think that makes you cursed. But sometimes the ones who walk with death are chosen to understand life more deeply than the rest of us." Marcus shook his head. "If I was chosen, it was by mistake. I fought for a Rome that devours its own. I killed for honor, and now that word means nothing." The monk rose and retrieved a small iron cross from the altar, simple, unadorned, yet oddly heavy. "Symbols lose meaning when men forget what they stand for," he said, placing it in Marcus's hand. "Perhaps it is not the cross that failed you, but the men who claimed it for power." Marcus turned the cross over in his palm. It was cold, unyielding, but in its weight there was something strangely grounding, like the earth itself pressing him to remember. He closed his fist around it, feeling the sharp edges dig into his skin. "I don't know who I am anymore," he admitted. "Then start with who you are not," the monk replied. That night, Marcus stayed in the monastery's courtyard, sleeping beneath the stars. In the distance, wolves howled, a sound both mournful and free. He dreamed of Lucian again, standing in the courtyard of the old citadel. But this time there was no blood, no blade, only silence. Lucian turned to him, his face unscarred, his eyes calm. "You can't outrun what you were," he said softly, "but you can become what you were meant to be." Marcus awoke trembling, the iron cross still clutched in his hand. Morning came with mist and the faint toll of a bell. He rose, feeling something shift within him, not redemption, but a kind of clarity. The monk greeted him at the gate. "Where will you go?" he asked. Marcus looked toward the horizon. "Where I'm needed," he said, "even if the world doesn't know it yet." He left behind the monastery, following a narrow road that twisted through valleys and ruins. Along the way, he helped where he could: a merchant beset by thieves, a widow whose cart had broken on the road, a child lost in the woods. He never gave his name. To some, he was a knight, to others, a wanderer. But to those who met him, even briefly, he became something else, a protector that appeared when darkness fell. Whispers began to follow him. In taverns and markets, stories were told of a lone knight with no banner, bearing a scar across his cheek and eyes that held both sorrow and grace. They said he fought not for gold or glory, but for those whom the world forgot. To the suffering, he was a savior. To the corrupt, a shadow in the night. The road that stretched before Marcus no longer felt Roman. It wound through lands that smelled of spice and smoke, where languages blended like wind over sand, and every sunrise painted the sky with fire. He had crossed the borders of the known world, leaving behind the ruins of an empire that had once claimed eternity. What lay ahead was older, deeper, a realm of forgotten kingdoms, mystics, and whispers that spoke of forces beyond any emperor's reach. Merchants along the caravan routes called this land the edge of heaven. To others, it was the threshold of the East, the place where Western faith met Eastern mystery, where saints and sorcerers shared the same silence. Marcus rode beneath red mountains and silver deserts, his armor dulled by dust, his cloak faded to the color of ash. The people he met did not ask where he came from. They only asked what he sought. To that, he had no answer. He reached the city of Antioch before the harvest moon, a crossroads of belief and ambition. There, minarets and cathedrals stood side by side, and the call to prayer mingled with the chants of monks. Gold gleamed in the markets, while relics traded hands like talismans of salvation. Yet beneath its beauty, Marcus sensed a tension, a hum of unrest that mirrored his own unrest soul. He lodged in a caravanserai overlooking the river, where travelers from every corner of the known world gathered. It was there he first heard the tale that would change his path. An old Persian scholar, his beard white as salt, spoke of a prophecy buried in the sands of Syria, an omen of iron and blood said to have crossed from the west centuries before. The cross that bleeds, the scholar called it, his eyes glinting like coals beneath his hood, forged in a dying empire, carried by a knight who vanished in a legend. They say it rests where the sun bows to the east. Marcus felt a chill crawl through him. The words sounded too familiar, too close to the ghost that still haunted him. What does the prophecy say? Marcus asked. The scholar's voice softened, as if afraid the walls might listen. It says the bearer of the Iron Cross will bring both ruin and revelation. To the faithful, a test. To the wicked, judgment. And when the shadow of the west meets the dawn of the east, the secret of God's fire will awaken again. He looked at Marcus for a long moment. Some say that night still walks the earth. Marcus said nothing, but in his heart something stirred, a sense that his wandering had not been aimless, that destiny had been leading him eastward all along. That night, he dreamed of the cross again, not as a relic, but as a light buried beneath sand, burning through the centuries. When he awoke, the scholar was gone, leaving behind only a single parchment marked with an unfamiliar seal. A serpent coiled around an iron sun. Guided by the parchment's cryptic symbols, Marcus joined a caravan traveling toward the ruins of Palmyra. The journey took weeks, through dunes that swallowed men whole and winds that sang like the dead. Each night, the desert revealed its own mysteries, fireflies that shimmered like stars fallen to earth, and distant drums that echoed across the horizon. The further east they went, the stronger the pull he felt, as though the earth itself whispered his name beneath his feet. At last, they reached the ruins, a vast, skeletal city half buried in the sands. Broken columns reached toward the sky like the bones of titans. The moon hung low, silver and watchful. Marcus walked among the fallen temples, guided by instinct more than reason. There, beneath the shattered statue of a forgotten god, he found it, a stone slab marked with the same serpent and sun emblem. As he brushed away the sand, faint inscriptions emerged, written in both Latin and Aramaic. From iron is faith reborn. Through betrayal, the flame shall pass east. His breath caught. It was a message older than memory, yet it spoke to his life as if carved for him alone. And beside it, half buried, lay something glinting in the sand. He dug with trembling hands until he uncovered it, a fragment of metal, blackened and etched with the faint outline of a cross. It was not his own. The design was foreign, twisted into a shape that felt almost alive. He lifted it carefully, feeling the weight of centuries in his palm. The air around him seemed to thicken, and for a moment, the silence of the desert broke with a distant whisper, a voice that spoke no language he knew, yet carried the echo of his own thoughts. "You're not the first." He dropped the fragment, his heart pounding. The desert wind rose suddenly, swirling sand into a storm. He shielded his face, stumbling back toward the shelter of the ruins. When the storm passed, the fragment was gone, swallowed by the earth as though it had never existed. That night, Marcus sat by the dying embers of his fire, his mind unraveling. What if Lucian's betrayal, the Order's corruption, the years of exile, what if all of it had been part of something larger? What if the Iron Cross was not merely a relic of faith, but a thread woven through time itself? He looked eastward, toward the lands beyond the horizon. The prophecy spoke of fire, of judgment. Dawn bled slowly over the desert, turning the dunes into waves of molten gold. The monastery's bells tolled softly in the distance, their sound fading into the wind as Marcus descended toward the valley. The monks had spoken of a forbidden site, a temple buried beneath centuries of shifting sands, a place their ancestors once guarded and feared. It was there, they whispered, that the prophecy of the Iron Cross had first been carved, long before Rome ever claimed to know God. Marcus traveled alone. The path wound between ridges where the air shimmered with heat, and the sun hung mercilessly above. His supplies dwindled quickly, but he pressed on, guided by the half-faded map he had copied from the monastery's archives. It spoke of a river that no longer flowed, of stone pillars marking the entrance to something deeper than any tomb. By the third day, he found them, two massive columns jutting from the sand, each etched with symbols worn smooth by time. The wind was sharp as he approached, carrying the faint scent of myrrh and dust. Between the pillars, the ground sank into darkness, a yawning fissure filled with shadow. He tied a rope around one column and began his descent, his torch flickering in the dry air. As he dropped lower, the temperature fell sharply, and the echo of his movements grew distant, swallowed by the earth. When his boots touched stone, he found himself standing in a vast cavern. The walls glowed faintly with mineral light, revealing carvings unlike anything he had seen. They depicted men in armor kneeling before a burning sigil, a cross not of wood or gold, but of iron. Around it, flames spiraled into shapes of wings, serpents, and eyes. Beneath the carvings, inscriptions in a dozen tongues told a single story, the covenant of fire. At the center of the chamber stood an altar of black stone, cracked by age but still humming with strange energy. Upon it rested a chalice made of dark metal, and above it, suspended by a chain, hung an ancient cross identical to the one Marcus carried, save for one difference. This one was glowing. Its light pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. Marcus approached with reverence and fear. The air vibrated around him as though charged with unseen force. He reached out, but before his fingers could touch the cross, a voice spoke, deep, resonant, echoing not in his ears but within his mind. "You have come far, son of Rome. Do you seek forgiveness or truth?" He froze. The voice carried no malice, yet it pressed against his thoughts like the weight of eternity. "I seek to understand," he said aloud, his words trembling in the dark. "Then understand this," the voice replied. "Faith is not born of light. It is forged in the shadow of doubt." Suddenly, the carvings on the walls began to shift, the ancient scenes coming alive in the flickering torchlight. He saw visions of the first bearers of the Iron Cross, knights from forgotten empires, crusaders whose banners bore no nation, only the mark of flame. They fought not for gold or conquest, but to guard something sacred, something feared by both king and priest. Yet one by one, they fell, not to war, but to betrayal. Marcus stepped closer to the altar. The chalice shimmered with a dark reflection. His own face, but older, wearier, his eyes hollowed by centuries. He stumbled back, gripping his sword though it offered no comfort. The voice spoke again. Every bearer carries the same burden. You are not the first to seek redemption through iron. You are the latest to bleed for it. The chamber trembled. Sand poured from the cracks above, and a low hum filled the air. Marcus realized the temple was not dead. It was awakening. The cross above the altar flared with light, casting shadows that danced like living things. He fell to his knees, blinded by the radiance. Images flooded his mind. Rome in flames, cities swallowed by sand, armies kneeling before unseen fire. He saw Lucian again, his brother in arms, standing before him not as a man, but as a figure of light and ash. "You couldn't save me," Lucian's voice whispered, "but you can still save yourself." Marcus reached for him, but the vision shattered. The light dimmed, and the chamber fell silent once more. When he opened his eyes, the glowing cross hung motionless, its fire extinguished. Only a faint warmth lingered in the air, as if the presence had retreated but not vanished. He rose slowly, his body trembling, and approached the altar again. This time, he lifted the ancient cross from its chain. It was heavy, heavier than his own, but when he held it against his chest, it seemed to pulse faintly, as though recognizing him. Beneath the altar, he noticed something carved into the stone, a line of text, written in Latin. Custos ignis eterni, the guardian of eternal fire. He slipped the relic into his satchel and turned toward the passageway leading out. But as he began to climb, he heard movement behind him, a whisper of footsteps on stone. He turned, sword drawn, expecting another vision. Instead, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man cloaked in crimson, his face hidden by a hood. "You should not have come here," the stranger said, his voice low but steady. Marcus tightened his grip on his sword. The Crusades, in this way, became both a proving ground and a cautionary tale for those who engaged with its secrets. Interestingly, the cross's influence extended across geographic and cultural boundaries. Crusaders encountering foreign kingdoms observed similar signs and symbols, adapting interpretations to local traditions. Rumors of the cross spread along trade routes, military campaigns, and diplomatic missions, touching distant lands where it became woven into local legends. Each reinterpretation preserved the core mystery while adapting to new audiences, creating a web of influence that transcended national, linguistic, and religious divides. The Iron Cross became not just a European phenomenon, but a force of perception, shaping belief and behavior across continents. The Crusades also amplified the interplay of guardians and betrayers. Manuscripts moved with armies, safeguarded by loyal monks, yet constantly threatened by spies, opportunists, and ambitious knights. Some custodians manipulated knowledge, interpreting visions to justify actions or consolidate power. Others acted out of fear, hiding or misrepresenting information to prevent misuse. The result was a complex network of influence, secrecy, and human psychology in which every decision, whether moral or self-serving, affected outcomes in unpredictable ways. The cross, unseen and silent, orchestrated consequences through human agency, proving its subtle yet absolute power. Echoes of the prophecy persisted long after individual battles. Chronicles, letters, and marginal notes preserved accounts of visions, warnings, and outcomes linked to the cross. Even when physical manuscripts were lost, fragments survived in storytelling, ritual, and memory, ensuring that the legend endured. These echoes served both as guidance and warning, reinforcing the psychological power of the cross and its capacity to influence future generations. Knowledge, once glimpsed, could never be fully erased, and its effects rippled far beyond the battlefield. The emotional intensity of the Crusades magnified the Iron Cross's influence. Fear, hope, and desperation were heightened by proximity to death and the chaos of war. Visions and rumors became lifelines or instruments of dread, shaping decisions in ways tangible and intangible. Soldiers, scholars, and commanders alike were drawn into the prophecies' orbit, often without recognizing it. The cross, though absent, orchestrated outcomes through perception, human ambition, and belief, demonstrating that the most profound power can be subtle, invisible, and psychological. Ultimately, the Crusades illustrate the Iron Cross's enduring principle. Knowledge, belief, and human psychology are inseparable from action and consequence. The cross, hidden yet omnipresent, shaped events, inspired courage, and exposed flaw. Its influence was not absolute, yet it was undeniable, weaving its subtle hand into the tapestry of history. Warriors, monks, and rulers learned that the unseen could be as potent as the visible, and that destiny, perception, and human choice were bound together in ways both miraculous and perilous. Even centuries later, historians and storytellers trace the Iron Cross's echoes in accounts of battles, sieges, and diplomatic maneuvers. The legend persists, not as a tangible object alone, but as a force that shaped perception, guided behavior, and revealed the intricate interplay of human ambition, fear, and morality. The Crusades, with their mixture of faith, violence, and uncertainty, remain a testament to the cross's subtle yet profound power, reminding us that even unseen forces can define the course of history. The road to the mountains was little more than a scar across the wilderness, jagged, cold, and lined with the bones of travelers who had come seeking redemption and found only frost. Marcus rode in silence, his horse weary, its breath misting in the dawn air. Behind him, the empire burned. Ahead lay the forgotten monastery of St. Avellini, a place whispered of in dying tongues, where the Iron Cross was said to have been forged in secret by those who had seen both heaven and hell. The wind howled through the passes like a choir of the dead. Each step upward seemed to drag the weight of centuries with it. The world below faded into mist and memory, and the only sound was the crunch of hooves on snow and the soft rasp of Marcus's breath. He had not eaten in 2 days. He could barely feel his hands, but the cross, strapped to his chest, wrapped in cloth, still pulsed faintly, a heartbeat that was not his own. By nightfall, he reached the cliffs. There, carved into the rock, was a gate, a monolithic archway adorned with symbols older than Scripture. Fire and wings, swords and eyes, spirals that seemed to move when the light touched them. Marcus approached, his torch flickering. The wind died as he placed his hand upon the gate. It was warm. "You have carried the burden far," said a voice behind him. Marcus turned sharply. An old monk stood in the snow, his robe threadbare, his eyes clouded yet unyielding. "How long have you followed me?" Marcus asked. "Since before you were born," the monk said. "All who bear the cross are followed." Marcus frowned. "Then you know what I carry. You know what it can do." The monk nodded slowly. "And what it costs." He stepped forward, gesturing toward the gate. "Inside lies the truth that built kingdoms and destroyed them. You will not like what you find." "I stopped liking truth a long time ago," Marcus muttered. Together, they entered. The monastery was carved directly into the mountain's side, a labyrinth of stone corridors and silent halls. Candles burned without flame, their light soft and golden, filling the air with a strange stillness. Statues lined the passageways, warriors, kings, and saints, each bearing the same mark upon their breast, the sigil of the Iron Cross. Who were they? Marcus asked. Those who believed, the monk said, and those who paid for belief. They came at last to a chamber deep within the rock. In its center stood an altar of black stone, upon which rested a single object, a sword whose blade shimmered like liquid light. Carved into its hilt was the same sigil, the cross with burning wings. "The first guardian's blade," said the monk, "he who forged the covenant of fire." The sword and the cross were once one, separated to keep the world safe from what they could summon. Marcus unwrapped the relic. The Iron Cross gleamed faintly, its edges still scorched from the Emperor's fall. The air trembled as he set it beside the blade. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the chamber darkened, and a low hum filled the air, growing into a voice, deep, ancient, and sorrowful. "Why do you return?" it asked. Marcus swallowed hard. "Because I must end what they began." "End?" the voice murmured. "There is no end, only the passing of the flame." The floor cracked beneath him, revealing carvings that glowed with molten light, scenes of angels forging weapons, of men kneeling in chains, of stars falling like tears. The air grew heavy with heat and memory. The monk stepped forward. "He is not like them," he said. "He carries guilt, not greed." A pause. Then the voice spoke again. "And yet guilt burns as fiercely as desire." Marcus fell to his knees, gripping the stone for balance. Images flooded his mind. Templars in battle, the betrayal at Jerusalem, the emperor's madness, and the endless wars fought in the name of salvation. He saw himself in all of them, a man repeating the same sin century after century. "What do you want of me?" he whispered. "To choose," the voice said, "to return the flame to the heavens, or to let it fall upon the earth once more." The monk turned to him. "You know what must be done." Marcus hesitated. "If I destroy it, the knowledge, the history, it all dies. And if you keep it?" the monk asked gently. Marcus looked at the relic, its light reflecting in his eyes. "Then the world burns again." He took the sword in one hand, the cross in the other. The two objects vibrated violently, the air screaming around him. Sparks burst into fire, and the chamber trembled as stone cracked and dust fell from the ceiling. The voice roared. "Do you understand the cost?" "Yes," Marcus shouted, "and I accept it." With a cry, he thrust the cross into the blade. For an instant, the world went white. A sound like thunder echoed through the mountains, and the fire rose, swallowing everything. Then silence. When Marcus opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground, the monk kneeling beside him. The altar was gone. So was the sword. Only a faint light lingered in the air, drifting upward like smoke. "It is done," the monk said softly. "The covenant is broken." Marcus felt a strange peace settle over him. "What will become of it?" "It will return to where it was born," the monk replied. "To the stars, to the silence between." Outside, the first rays of dawn pierced the cave mouth. Snowflakes glowed like embers in the light. Marcus stood slowly, his breath visible in the cold air. "Then my pilgrimage ends." The monk shook his head. "No, it begins anew. Every man who remembers carries a spark. It is not the fire that destroys us, it is forgetting." Marcus smiled faintly. "Then I will remember." He stepped into the morning light. The wind howled again, carrying with it the faintest echo of the voice from below, a whisper that was neither curse nor blessing, but something eternal. And as he disappeared down the mountain path, the monastery behind him faded into mist as though it had never existed at all. But far below, in the heart of the earth, a single ember remained, waiting. 23. The Echo of the Iron Cross. 1,050 words, centuries passed. Kingdoms rose and fell, and the memory of the Iron Cross faded into the dust of forgotten chronicles. Scholars dismissed it as myth, priests called it heresy. Yet, somewhere beneath the quiet hum of time, its story endured, an echo that refused to die. In a monastery high in the Alps, an old historian bent over a parchment, his candle nearly burned to nothing. His name was Father Anselm, a man devoted to uncovering lost truths. For years he had searched through archives, piecing together fragments of legends that spoke of fire, of a night, and of a cross that glowed with the breath of heaven. Tonight, he had found something new. The scroll was brittle, its ink faded, but the words were clear enough to make his heart race. The flame returns when the world forgets. He read it again and again, then looked toward the window where the storm howled against the glass. In the distance, lightning flashed, illuminating the valley below, a valley where, according to old maps, no monastery had ever stood. He whispered, "Marcus," as if the name itself might summon a ghost. Outside, a bell tolled once. Centuries after Father Anselm's vanished monastery and the last sighting of the Iron Cross, the world had changed beyond recognition. Empires had fallen. Faith had fractured into thousands of voices, and the language of prophecy had been buried beneath the noise of progress. Yet some things refused to fade. Some fires burned beneath the surface of history, unseen but never extinguished. In the year 1899, deep beneath the streets of Vienna, a team of archaeologists unearthed a sealed chamber while expanding the catacombs. The air that spilled from within was dry, ancient, and heavy with a metallic scent. On the wall, carved in Latin, was a single phrase, Ignis Aeternus non dormit. The eternal fire does not sleep. Dr. Helena Vorst, a historian of medieval mysticism, was called to examine the site. Her colleagues dismissed it as another crypt, perhaps belonging to a forgotten sect. But Helena knew better. Her late father, a priest and scholar, had spent his life chasing a legend, the story of a knight who carried a cross of living fire. As she descended into the dim chamber, torchlight flickering against the damp walls, she felt something stir. A whisper, faint but familiar, like a voice she had heard in her childhood dreams. The room was circular, lined with murals depicting scenes of fire and flight, men kneeling beneath falling stars, and a black-winged cross at the center of them all. At the far end stood a sarcophagus of iron, its lid etched with the same sigil she had seen in her father's notes, a cross surrounded by flame. She touched the cold surface, tracing the engraving with trembling fingers. "The Iron Cross," she breathed. "You're real." Her assistant, a skeptical young archaeologist named Friedrich, frowned. "It's just a tomb, Helena. Don't tell me you believe in your father's fairy tales." "Fairy tales don't survive 800 years," she replied quietly. With great effort, they pried open the lid. Inside lay a figure clad in scorched armor, the face hidden by a rusted helm. Upon the chest, clasped in skeletal hands, rested a cross of blackened metal. Even after centuries underground, it gleamed faintly, as if lit from within. The air grew still. "Get the torch," Helena whispered. Friedrich held the light closer. The flame bent toward the relic, drawn as if by breath. Then, without warning, the torch flared, and the entire chamber glowed red. Symbols along the walls ignited, burning with lines of fire that ran like veins across the stone. "What's happening?" Friedrich shouted, stepping back. Helena stared, transfixed. "It's waking up." The sarcophagus shook. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a deep, resonant hum filled the chamber. the sound of metal vibrating like a bell struck in some ancient cathedral. The cross's light grew stronger until it burned too bright to look at. Then suddenly silence. The glow faded. The relic was cold again. Helena's hands trembled. "He's still guarding it," she whispered. "Who?" Friedrich asked, voice unsteady. "The knight. Marcus." Friedrich forced a nervous laugh. "Helena, listen to yourself. It's a relic, nothing more." But Helena's gaze remained fixed on the armor. "No," she said softly. "It's a memory that refuses to die." That night, she couldn't sleep. The image of the relic haunted her, its faint pulse, the sound it made like a distant heartbeat. She returned to the dig site alone, lantern in hand, drawn by something she couldn't name. When she entered the chamber, the air was different, warmer, alive. Her lantern flickered as though caught in a wind that came from nowhere. She knelt before the sarcophagus and spoke aloud, her voice trembling. "If you can hear me, I want to understand. What were you protecting?" For a moment, nothing. Then, a flicker of light. The cross glowed faintly, just once. And in the silence that followed, she heard a whisper. "The fire is faith. Faith must not burn alone." She gasped, her breath clouding in the air. "Who are you?" The voice seemed to echo from every wall, deep and sorrowful. "A witness. A warning. When the world forgets, the fire returns." She backed away, shaking. "Why me?" "Because you remember." The light faded again, leaving her in total darkness. She stood there for a long moment, heart racing, before forcing herself to climb back to the surface. The night sky above Vienna was pale with dawn, and, as she stepped into the cold air, she saw something that made her stop. On the horizon, beyond the cathedral spires, a faint red light shimmered. Not sunrise, not fire, but something older, something alive. In the weeks that followed, Helena tried to tell her peers what she had seen. They laughed, of course. They called it exhaustion, imagination, the fever of obsession. But the relic disappeared before they could study it further. The chamber collapsed days later in an unexplained explosion, sealing whatever was left inside. Helena left Vienna soon after. She wandered for years, following traces, fragments of scripture, burned manuscripts, rumors of strange lights in the mountains. Each led nowhere. Yet she could never forget the words spoken in that underground tomb. When the world forgets, the fire returns. Decades later, as war once again consumed Europe, she understood. The fire had returned, not as prophecy, but as men's own creation. Cities burned, skies filled with ash, and faith turned once more to fury. On her final night, she sat by candlelight in a small cottage on the Rhine, writing by hand what would become her last journal. She wrote, "We called it myth, but the Iron Cross was never about metal or relics. It was a mirror. It showed us what we are when belief becomes possession. The night carried it to remind us that power without mercy is the oldest heresy of all." The candle guttered. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark river. Helena closed her eyes and whispered, "Let the fire sleep." The wind blew through the window, snuffing the flame. But somewhere far above, beyond the reach of storm or empire, a single star flared brighter than the rest, its light pulsing like the heartbeat of something eternal. The Iron Cross had vanished again, but its echo remained, not in relics or ruins, but in the fragile spark of faith that refused to die, the fire that lived quietly within those who remembered. And perhaps, in some forgotten corner of the world, a buried ember still waited, knowing that one day, when the world needed it most, the flame would rise once more.